All right, good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, November 18th at 6 o'clock, and I would like to call to order our first public hearing for our SAU 39 district budget. I first need to entertain a motion to actually open up our public hearing. Thank you, Ms. Precy, second by Mr. Conklin. All in favor, please just raise your hands. Great. And do we have anybody that's remote?
We do have Mr. Goff here who's on.
Okay, so we do have somebody that is remote, so we just need to do a roll call in compliance with our policy, starting off with Mr. Gronstra.
Yes.
Taylor, yes.
Clark, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes. Glover, yes.
And Gothier, yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Gothier, just for the record, that it was not possible for you to be here, that your location and if you're alone.
Oh, I am alone, but I very much wish I could be there.
Okay, thank you. All right, sir. Mr. Superintendent, I'll turn the public hearing over to you.
Thank you very much. Tonight, our business administrator, Ms. Facey, will be going back over the changes from last month's budget presentation to this evening. Ms. Facey.
Thank you. Yes, I just have a few slides. So just to refresh our memories on the budget review process, the board was presented with the budget on 10/13/2021. On 10/27, the SAU budget subcommittee reviewed the budget and had a meeting and discussed all changes. There were 3 members of the subcommittee. We had a representative from the Sauhegan Advisory Finance Committee, a representative from the Ways and Means from Amherst. Unfortunately, there is no Mount Vernon budget subcommittee or budget committee this year, so no representative. And we also had a member of the public who is on the Ways and Means, but was representative of the public. The subcommittee met on 10/27 with board members present and administrators present. And the end result of that was a 3-0 vote in favor of the budget. Following that, the notice of this budget hearing was sent to area newspapers and publications and on the website. At the time that the budget was presented, the average daily membership and attendance was not yet available from the New Hampshire Department of Education. So the calculation was made based on the end of year, June 30th number. Since that time, on 11/15, the New Hampshire DOE published the average daily membership, and the revised apportionments were made to the school district budgets. And then tonight we are here having the SAU public hearing. There were very modest changes from the 10/13 budget presentation. We received information from Primex on our not to exceed numbers and rates on property liability, unemployment compensation, and workers' compensation. There were some small adjustments to the professional development and travel budgets for some omissions and corrections. And there was a net reduction in the technology budget for items that were already included in the school district budgets, for a net increase of $607. So based on the revised New Hampshire DOE FY21 ADMA, the SAU budget to be apportioned is $2,722,866. And the apportionments are for Amherst, $1,572,243, for Mount Vernon, $251,196, and for Sauhegan, $899,427. And that concludes my brief presentation. I'll take any questions.
Great. So this is an opportunity for the public to make any comments, questions. Before I get to 2 that I received by email, any members of the public here wish to address the SAU 39 budget? You can step up to the mic, sir. Just state your name, the town in which you reside, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes. Oh yeah, I got to turn that mic on. So right on the bottom, there's a button that you got to press to the green on the bottom. There we go. Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, so I'm new to this, so the first thing that you get is an apology because I'm not strictly on topic. Perhaps this would have been a better thing to mention on Tuesday's meeting, but I'll keep it short to not derail.
Sir, just a quick moment. If you can state your name, the town in which you reside. And tonight, right now, we're taking comments specific to the budget. And then we'll have our regular school board meeting where we'll open up the floor to topics that are other than the budget. Does that make sense?
And when is that?
In 15 minutes?
15 minutes. Okay, so in that case,
Perfect.
I yield the floor.
Thank you. Any comments specific to the SAU 39 budget? Seeing no comments, I've got two that I received by email. Let me pull those back up here. These questions actually came from Ms. Gibson, who was unable to be here due to a situation where she was not able to be in person. Her first question is there any legal constraints on a hiring freeze throughout the district?
I think the board has the ability to restrict the hiring of staff members. So any certified staff member is nominated to the school board by me and then elected by the board. So the boards are the ones that are doing the final hiring step for certified staff. For people who don't require certification, I don't have the ability to hire anyone that doesn't have a budgeted position already. I suppose the board could go further and say that that no hiring is to take place even for uncertified staff. So I think that would be a board level decision.
Thank you. The second question is there any legal constraint on issuing a salary freeze for administrators and teachers?
Again, the board has discretion there, except when it comes to collectively bargained contracts with any teachers, paraprofessionals, or others who are represented by a bargaining unit. Those salary scales and those wage adjustments are required by law.
Great. And seeing no other questions from the public, I received no other advanced questions. I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing. Made by Ms. Parisi, seconded by Ms. Kuzma. We're going to do a roll call vote. All in favor, starting with Mr. Gronstra.
Peters, yes.
Clark, yes.
Hinckley, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes. Glover, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Thank you. That motion carries. The public hearing is now closed. And now we'll have an opportunity to engage our board members with questions on the budget. Yes, Ms. Taylor.
Since whether our individual budgets pass or not depends on how much money we have in our district, and the SAU 39 doesn't change, is it possible to not include the raises for the SAU 39 unless the district budgets pass?
Unfortunately, no. The board is required the SAU board is required to set their budget as of a date in December. And so there's no way to change it after that fact. And the reason why is to make sure those apportionment numbers go into the Amherst, Mount Vernon, and Sauhegan budgets so that there's certainty for those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Great. And I spoke out of turn. I should have entertained a motion to adopt the SAU budget as presented. So I'll entertain that motion first, and then we'll open it up for discussion. My apologies. So the motion to accept as presented, Ms. Kuzma, seconded by Mr. Conklin. I'm sorry, Mr. Coughlin. Let's do open for discussion. Any questions, comments, concerns with regards to the SAU 39 budget? Ms. Kuzma.
My question's actually a follow-up on something Adam said in response to Marilyn's question. Can I get clarity? Okay, so for any administration and stuff like that, occasionally there is raises built into their contracts. If we as a district decide not to follow through with that, are there any legal?
Yeah, so if there are any administrators with a multi-year contract that also has their salary levels determined for those future years, that also is a contractual obligation of the district that couldn't be altered.
Any other questions? I will say, as a member that attended the SAU Budget Committee meeting, the process was thoroughly vetted. We had some engaging conversations, although we disagreed on some points. It was something that we all properly vetted, discussed, and articulated both the pros and cons of certain aspects to it. So there was a very thorough review, so the public can be informed that the due diligence was actually done at that level. I witnessed it firsthand.
Same.
Any other questions, comments before we call the vote? Seeing none, there's a motion on the floor to adopt the SAU 39 budget as presented and seconded. And let's start off with the roll call vote. Mr. Gronstra.
Gronstra, yes.
Peters, yes.
Taylor, yes.
Clark, yes.
Hinckley, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes. Glover, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Great, that motion passes. All right, so let's move on to the remaining items on our agenda. We're going to call our regular SAU 39 school board meeting to order, and the time is actually 6:12. And our first of two public comment periods. So if you wanted to come back up, now is the opportunity to address all other issues. Again, please state your name, the town in which you reside, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes. Sure. At the end of the meeting, we historically open up the floor for public comments again.
Thank you. I am Peter Klapka, 18 Waterview Drive here in Amherst.
Thank you.
And eventually I will get this right. Thank you. 45 years of nothing and then twice in 1 week. Good evening, board members. In light of recent events, I became interested in the policies and procedures at SHS for the handling, escalation, and oversight of disciplinary actions against teachers. This information has proven challenging to track down, if it exists, as the publicly accessible SAU 39 district policies on personnel don't appear to mention this. It's my understanding that as a citizen of Amherst, I am able to request that a topic be added to the school board's future agendas and be taken up by the board. I'd like to take this opportunity to do so. Specifically, I'd like to request that the school board look into the procedures, practices, and documentation of 1. How and by whom are disciplinary actions against teachers initiated? 2. What infractions warrant what level of disciplinary actions? 3. How are records of such infractions and subsequent disciplinary actions kept? 4. What is the escalation process for repeat infractions? 5. How are teachers and other SAU 39 employees trained on these procedures? 6. What infractions warrant the removal of a teacher from their duties? 7. What infractions warrant the physical removal of a teacher from school grounds? 8. Who has the authority to exercise and enforce these disciplinary actions? And 9, and most importantly, how are the individuals with that authority overseen to ensure that they are held accountable to following fair and legal procedures? I would like to request that the board seeks answers to these procedural questions, establish where such processes are documented, provide that information to the public, and as applicable, conduct an audit to ensure that the disciplinary actions against teachers and other school district employees are carried out with adherence to known procedure and with provisions for oversight and accountability. Thank you, and I look forward to seeing this on your agenda soon.
Great, thank you. If you don't mind, sir, if you're willing, please submit your written comments to our board secretary so we can capture your exact request right over there, Danae. And then what we could do is we can figure out a way that we can discuss this at a future meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Any other members of the public that would like to address the board, sir?
Came with an extra copy.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Martin Goulet. I'm at 22 Veterans Road in Amherst. And I've provided a copy of this statement for the record. On 10/29, the SAU 39 community received an email that a music instructor in Sauhegan High School resigned due to personal issues. This message was also conveyed in person to music students by the Sauhegan principal in a way that seemed to ignore that this would be an extremely heartfelt blow to many of those students, not least of which because it implied abandonment by their beloved teacher. However, on 11/9, in a public Q&A involving only band parents, we learned that this teacher is still employed by Sauhegan. Thus, it appears that the earlier communication was flatly not true. Given that the community has this wildly inaccurate information based on the earlier email, I'd like to know why there hasn't been a correcting email or communication with the wider community, which received the original email. I'm also wondering, is this board, as well as the Sauhegan Cooperative School Board, concerned that this matter has dramatically impaired the trust and future effectiveness in our brand new high school principal by putting him in a position of having effectively lied to the school community in some of his earliest public widespread communications? This is not the only personnel matter across the SAU in recent years that has raised unanswering and potentially troubling questions. Many in the community are asking about the rash of turnover in teaching and non-teaching positions alike in the school and in the SAU itself. I urge the SAU 39 board, together with the various Amherst, Mount Vernon school boards, to launch a formal, joint, independent investigation into the circumstances surrounding this and every other personnel separation of the last 3 years. We urge you to do so with citizen participation and oversight. And we ask that this investigation consider whether these separations have been handled consistent with federal and state law and regulations, as well as SAU 39 policies, procedures, and principles. In particular, we would like you to address the extent to which these separations have been conducted consistent with the board superintendent relationship document published on the SAU website. In particular, number 5, to deal always in an ethical, honest, straightforward, open, and above board manner with the board, staff, students, and community. Number 13, to remember that schools exist for the benefit of the students and the community. And in the case of Sauhegan personnel matters, it also seems useful to evaluate them in the context of the Sauhegan 6, especially demonstrate behavior
And sir,
that-
you're at 3 minutes. We'll give
that
you
is
a 30-second
considerate of the
extension.
community, be truthful, communicate honestly. Thank you for allowing me to run over.
Thank you. Any other members of the community that like to address the board? Thank you. If you just state your name, town in which you reside, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Anna Goulet Zimmerman. I also live at 22 Veterans Road. I'm going to be very, very brief because my husband has covered most of the concerns I had. I just wanted to say that I sent an email to, I think, all of you, but I may have had some of the emails wrong. Basically talking about the support for Carl and my concerns. I got some responses saying this doesn't involve the greater SAU board. And I understand that on the one hand. I just wanted to come today to say that I think it really does, because what happens with our teachers, and when our teachers see senior teachers who are being, disappearing, resigning, not being renewed, and no one knows why, when people see things like this, Carl's been on leave for 6-7 weeks now with no resolution in sight, no correction of what's happened. This is not the kind of environment that makes teachers want to stay within the district at all, because these decisions, as you've heard, come from the superintendent's office and then come down to you all. So it impacts every one of your boards, every one of your teachers. You're going to end up with junior teachers who are thinking, maybe this was going to be the place that was my home and my career forever. Maybe they're rethinking that. And you're going to have senior teachers who thought this was their home forever and are teaching now under a cloud and a fear that maybe that's not the case, and they too are going to be silently resigned. So I just wanted to share that. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you. Any other members of the community that would like to address the board?
Hi there.
If you could just state your name, town at which you reside, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
My name is Susan Avis, and I live at 13 Waterview Drive. I'm here to support the reinstatement of Carl Benavides as a band director. My story is a bit more personal, and I understand this board does not have jurisdiction in this matter, but I urge you as community members, this is very, very important. I've lived in Amherst for 30 years, and I've raised 2 children in the system. My daughter Jen, 2007, and my son Joey, 2010. Both were active band students during their time here. You can find their names on a number of plaques in the music department acknowledging their contributions. My daughter Jen is a full-time high school music teacher in Massachusetts, now heading a music technology program, and actively plays professionally in local pit orchestras for theater productions, thanks to the contributions of Carl Benavides. My son Joey is a sales director for Sherwin-Williams and remains active in local music as well. My husband's a former music teacher, and both he and I enjoy playing and performing in a number of community groups throughout the year. I first began attending Sauhegan music concerts in 2003. While the caliber of the ensembles was not generally very good at the time, at least we had better seating than at AMS. I recall one concert where we endured a concert band with 13 saxophones and a number of adult community band members. He had to fill out his instrumentation from someplace, I suppose. Carl was faced with a number of challenges in this school in developing the music program here to include a limited feeder program of students from the middle school scheduling and budget constraints. Still, he persevered. I watched the band grow year after year, initially performing very low band level pieces to a well-groomed ensemble performing famous works, which actually placed first at a band competition in Maryland in the spring of 2010. He devoted countless hours to include staying late on Thursday evenings to have a full band rehearsal, as the limitations Division I and Division II scheduling never allowed the full ensemble to rehearse together. Carl always went the extra mile, even meeting my daughter and I at a music store in Hooksett in the middle of the summer to help us look at professional saxophones, a purchase of which would be necessary for her upcoming college auditions. There's a saying in business, fail to plan, plan to fail. 3 years ago, Chris Brunel retired after a long tenure teaching band at AMS. A committee was formed to review resumes and interview potential candidates. This allowed for a qualified candidate to take his place and ensure a seamless transition. There was no planning in the regards to Carl Benavides, and it appears the 21 years Carl has spent in devotion to our students has effectively been torched. I've seen this happen in music programs throughout the years in Amherst. It shouldn't continue. We're better than that. This affects a multitude of issues to include all-state, college auditions, and senior projects, not to mention the concerts and enrichment he brought our community. I'm already hearing the jazz night is potentially canceled. At this point in the school year, the district has elected to—
Ma'am, your 3 minutes is up. We'll give you a
Thank you.
30-second extension to wrap up.
Okay. In closing, let me say music's a lifelong gift that we can give our graduates. I've been performing for well over 50 years. My grandfather performed into his 70s, and with John Philip Sousa as well. I've watched school boards struggle with these issues for STEM education versus STEAM education. I think everyone here knows that school music is important. Everyone here knows the name of their high school band teacher or their high school music teacher. If we do not retain the vibrant music which Carl so diligently brought to this community, music will likely remain a distant memory for our students when they are in their 60s, as I am. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to submit your written comments to Danae, you're more than welcome to do so. Ma'am, if you just want to sit there and say your name, address, well, not necessarily address, but town in which you reside, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm Tiani Coleman, and I live on Simeon Wilson here in Amherst. You have received some emails from me, a couple of them, as well as I was a signatory of the letter that went to all of you with the petition that's been signed by over 1,200 people. So I don't have written comments today. If you are able to move any of those emails into the minutes, I would appreciate it, or, keep record of what I'm saying right now. But I just, there are many things that have already been said that I completely agree with. I just wanted to add that, I think there's a real concern when we have a letter that went out to everyone misinforming the public about the resignation of a teacher. But also, we have pointed out that the October 13th minutes that was part of this meeting for all of you discussed some music changes, discussed the potential reallocation of a position. We don't know very much about it. We'd like to get answers about what that really was and if Carl's position was part of that reallocation. If on the 5th, when that was brought up in the meeting that day, was the day that, Carl was, I guess, put on administrative leave, and then on the 13th, they're talking about it as well. I just want to know if this was if this was something that was planned, even though it would be, wrongful. So I need to know that, and we just want to get answers about why this has happened with the procedure that doesn't seem to be appropriate. There's something wrong with the procedure when something is sent out like this that's wrong, but nothing's corrected. I looked at the school board and their policies, and there were some policies in place for complaints, but I'm not sure if it's these kinds of complaints. Didn't look like it was complaints. But if it is, I don't see that this policy's been followed. I don't see that there have been several steps taken, and if there's a trail, a written record and trail of what has happened. And if there is, I would ask that, that be taken care of. And if that is not the policy that is actually applicable, then like Mr. Klapka said, we need to know what the policies are that are applicable for these kinds of situations. I've written several times already about the detriment that's happening to our music program. It's a big detriment on many levels. So I hope that you can look at those emails. A few of you, the emails bounced because the emails that are on the website must not be correct because they bounce when I send them to you. But I just hope that you'll be able to read that because it's been detrimental what has happened to our music program. And I feel bad because I don't really want to have an adversarial relationship with the administration or with the board. But I believe in this strongly and we need to get it resolved. And so what I really ask is that you just really consider if this is the right thing, if this really was what needed to be done, if this is the way we should treat our 21-year tenured teachers and our students who depend upon them. And if it's not the right thing, let's just do the right thing. And then let's move on. Let's just do the right thing. Okay. So that we can all, work together to make a better school.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to address the board? Thank you, sir. If you can state your name, town in which you reside, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. Larry Ballard, Amherst. I have been the chorus teacher at AMS for 23 years and also was previously the arts coordinator at the middle school. This is in response to the proposal that was presented last month and not related to any personnel issues. Last month, Mr. Berry stated the visual and performing arts are an area where SAU 39 can do better, and I could not agree more because that's exactly what I've been saying for the past 22 years at the end of my first year in 1999. And whenever possible, doing what I can to help move the needle in the right direction. As we've heard earlier tonight, we know the arts are important. It's a subject that we offer all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade across our entire SAU. As a district and SAU that strives to create lifelong learners, we give our music students a skill that they can apply beyond graduation. Locally, we have groups like the Sauhegan Valley Chorus, the Amherst Town Band, and many church choirs, where adults can continue to refine the skills they learned in our schools. We invite musicians in similar type groups to perform in the Village Green during the summer as part of our 4th of July celebration. And when school boards are looking for ways to challenge our highest achieving learners, the arts are a perfect vehicle for offering challenge and growth at an individual level. And we publicly celebrate the successes of our students. When schools talk about social emotional learning, the arts offer an ideal way for students to express and celebrate the enrichment of the human spirit and to connect with their fellow people. I did think a lot about this statement tonight. I sat down and came up with reasons why I believe that someone should be paying closer attention to the arts in SAU 39. The list is a little bit long for this public comment session, but just as an example, I would highlight that Amherst School District has not revised its visual art or music curriculum since 1990, nor do I believe the arts were in the 5-year curriculum plan that the SAU board saw last year. And I think any subject, math, science, English, where you don't touch the curriculum in 31 years, that action or lack of action does say a lot about the priorities. I'm also wondering about the process by which this came about, because last month's meeting, which I watched eagerly, was the first time myself or any other art or music teacher in Amherst had ever heard about such a proposal. And at this point, I am not 100% convinced that an additional layer of administration may be the right approach at this time. For example, if I'm an Amherst board member, I would have some significant questions about the cost versus benefit, about how much time I'm going to receive from an employee that I don't have any oversight of. And your teacher bargaining units may have some thoughts about a Sauhegan teacher observing Amherst or Mount Vernon teachers. But if you want to know how to improve the arts programs, you first need to talk with your teachers. Okay, you have people you employ on your payrolls who are really knowledgeable and experts in their field. The day in, day out, year to year work required to build a program over time, to take it from one place and move it to another, to move students along in their skills from beginners figuring out how to open up the case to students, excelling at the highest levels, is not a we can do this without the teachers sort of approach. Looking at music, I've been at SAU 39 for 23 years. Carl Benavides has been here for 21 years. Robert Allwarden has been here for 25 plus, and I think has taught at about every school in the district. And my fellow colleagues that I work with presently also have a rich breadth of experience.
Mr. Ballard, your 3 minutes is up. I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap up.
So if you want an honest assessment of best practices and standards, what it takes to be one of the best communities in New Hampshire, to be on that list of the best communities in music education, please ask, but please be prepared to follow through, because it's going to take some resources to make that happen. I love that I finally get to see my chorus kids every other day this year. But that's a schedule change that took 22 years of asking to get to. So I absolutely agree the quality of offerings should be better. As a school system, we are underserving the needs of our students, our community. The positive response from all of the members of the board was very encouraging, and all of your arts teachers are ready to roll up our sleeves and help and advance that goal. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd like to submit your comments to the record, feel free to do so. Okay, any other comments from the public? Nope. Seeing none. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. Hi. So Gwen Kraus, I live in Mount Vernon. I'm here in support of Carl Benavides. I'm not sure if I said his name right, but I don't have a prepared statement. I'm just speaking from the heart. I actually really didn't know how impressive his resume was until all of this happened. And when we found out that he was gone, I asked my son Parker, how do you feel about this? And he said, I really liked Carl. I think we should bring him back if possible. So I've been following a little bit, not as closely as many of the people in the room, what's going on. And it doesn't seem right to me that he's just in limbo and that there's nothing it doesn't seem like there's anything we can do about that. I do feel that if he had something to hide, he wouldn't be coming forward like this. That's just my feeling. So I just wanted to publicly state my support for Carl. That's all. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from the public? Great, if you could state your name, town in which you reside, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
My name is Rolf Van Bibber. I live in Amherst, New Hampshire. I'd first like to thank the board for being here, and I'd like to thank members of the public for coming, especially since this is the most people I've seen at a school board meeting, and I've come to quite a few now. I'd just like to pretty much back everything that's been said so far. I believe that the resignation statement that was given to the public is definitely misleading, and that should be corrected at the very least to the public, not just to band parents. And I would also like to state my solidarity with the band students. I know that a lot of them have been very close to Carl. Carl has been a very active member of the community for obviously 21 years. He was an example of true Sauhegan community. I know that in the agenda for today's meeting, there was a lot about bringing back the six. I would like to help practice the six by building a strong community and having trust and communication with students, parents, taxpayers, and let teachers have a say in what is generally happening. Thank you for holding this, and thank you for letting so many people speak about this issue, even though it wasn't in the agenda, and you've been very patient with everybody in handling this situation, so thank you.
Thank you. I will say it's always awesome to see students come in here. Takes a lot of guts to stand up in front of a lot of parents and adults and share your views and feel heard. So thank you, Rolf, for doing that and representing your fellow classmates extremely well. Thank you. Any other members of the public?
Parker would have come, but he had to work.
I understand that. All right, seeing no other comments from the public, thank you very much for attending tonight. More than welcome to continue to observe and watch and listen to the remaining part of our board meeting. Thank you very much for attending. We're going to move on actually to the next piece is our principal's report. And we're going to start off actually with our Clark Wilkins principal report. And if you'd like to step up.
I'm bringing somebody with me.
All right.
So Kathleen Murphy is here with me as she is on her journey as the incoming principal.
Great. So any questions for our Clark Wilkins program? Ms. Parisi.
So I believe that this is the report that we've already discussed at our Amherst School Board meeting. Sometimes I find it awkward at these meetings when you're watching from home or from the audience if no one asks them a question. It's not because we're not engaged, it's just that we've already gone through and asked the questions. So I don't have any additional questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? I will say I'm very impressed about the pig story. I hear Mount Vernon's going to be kissing a cow, so we're going to see which one.
Well, Steve, I'm also impressed by what seems to be the new principal duct tape to the door.
Yes. Yes.
Twice at two different buildings. Tom.
Tom's lucky. He can do 2 hallways.
Yeah.
The upper grades, the lower grades. But obviously, thank you very much for spending the time to generate that report. It's very helpful. I understand from the community's perspective why we actually see these reports at this meeting. It's because it's really good as a board member up on the Hill to understand what's going on in our other buildings so we can actually capture things that are actually doing quite well and potentially adopt them or look at things from a different lens or a different perspective. So thank you very much for standing here. And Victoria, couldn't agree more. I think it's awesome that we see these reports. All right, moving up to the Amherst Middle School over on Crossroad. Dr. Bernasconi. Any questions for Dr. Bernasconi? This is awesome. Dr. Bernasconi, I again want to reemphasize that we truly appreciate your effort to be here and obviously generating a report for us and making sure that we get that. I know at the Mount Vernon level, we did ask for your report to start to be included in our packet. So hopefully we actually start to see that at our monthly board meeting. And also, if you can, in this particular forum, and I know we addressed it a little bit at our Mount Vernon meeting at the beginning of the month, talk a little bit about the transition of our 6th graders going over into the middle school, the steps as a part of our tuition agreement so the public can actually hear it in this forum, the steps that you've actually taken. One of our assistant superintendents presented a pretty nice draft and he's going to be making a couple of changes based on our feedback. But if you could just take a moment and address that for us.
Terrific. Well, I think one of the special things about the middle school is it's the school in the district that really touches all the other schools, right? So transitions coming in from Clark Wilkins, transitions coming in from Mount Vernon, and sending our students on across the way to Sauhegan when they leave us in 8th grade. So transition is kind of the name of the game, and really bringing kids in, welcoming them, making sure that everybody feels like a connected part of our community of learners, and then helping them grow through that to the point where they can come over here and successfully integrate into the Sauhegan community. So we've done a number of things, everything from parent nights to student-only nights. One of my favorite pieces that we do with Mount Vernon, I think the 2 pieces that are my favorite are when our students come down and get to do a student panel and really hear it from the mouths of our students, right? Because it's one thing for the principal to tell you what it's like. It's a totally another thing to be able to ask somebody who's gone through it maybe a year ahead of you about what that experience is like. Everything from, getting on the bus to what lunch is like to how to navigate the school and all those pieces. So all of those pieces. And then one of my other favorite days is when I get to go up and hang out in the classroom up at Mount Vernon and just let the kids ask anything that's on their mind. And they usually start off a little bit quiet, and then there's just great discussion and great questions. And it's really an open forum for them to really get to know who I am, and that I'm there as an adult to help support them in our community as they enter. I think it really helps the number of different sports and activities too that our students both participate in. So we've missed having dances and things like that last year, but typically 6th grade camp and our 6th grade dances, our Mount Vernon students get to come and participate in those as well. So looking forward to getting all of that back up and really running again this year too, because those formal and informal pieces are both really critical to that. In addition, we meet with students on a pretty regular basis, and there's no secret recipe we found, right? It'd be simple if there was, but we've tried everything over the past several years, from really keeping this group of students and doing some specific orientation together. Their feedback largely from that was, we're ready to mix, like, please don't just make us all stay together for certain things. So we've really tried to take student feedback into how we can best support them in integrating into the school. 7th grade is a kind of a sweet spot for them to come in, because for many of our students, well, for all of our students, right, moving up from 6th to 7th is a major transition from the lower middle school into the upper middle school as well. So in many ways, there's a lot of new for all of our kids. But we're continuing that feedback. Our guidance counselor in 7th grade this year is Maggie Kim, and she's been meeting with all the students just to check in and find out what they need and how that transition is going and how we can better support them. So it's a lot of communication. I don't think anything takes the place of a lot of just FaceTime and relationship building, and making sure that that our students who are new to us really know the resources that are there to help support them, and that we're really there to listen and take their feedback and really help make it a great experience, and also empower them to help even improve the experience for the next group of kids. There's a sense of ownership and pride in that, hey, we get to help influence what might happen next year, or we would have really liked this. Can you try this for next year's class coming up?
Thank you. And just to add 2 more quick things on the same topic. I know at our board meeting, we were a little bit late in terms of doing our required check-in with our students, and that wasn't completed as of 2 weeks ago. How's that process going along now? Are we covering 80%, 90% of that?
Yeah.
Are we almost done?
We're really close. The trade-off is trying to get students at a time where it's not stressing them out.
Okay.
So the guidance has been really trying to pull them out of Eagle, so not core instructional time. We don't want them to miss specials or their core instruction, but a lot of times she'll go to meet with them in Eagle as well, and they'll be like, oh, I really needed to meet with this teacher to do this. So we're trying to do it in such a way that they don't feel stressed out that they're missing out on something that is important academically to them at that time. So that's why it's taken us a little bit longer.
Awesome.
But we're nearly done. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. And my last point is the one comment I made to our assistant superintendent is I'm really looking forward to seeing how we integrate our 6th graders or our 6th grade professionals up in Mount Vernon into 1 or 2 lessons this year, and how we do that, whether it's virtually, in person. So I'm excited to learn. Hopefully we can get a report on that in the coming months to see how that's going.
There's definitely been silver linings to come out of COVID and remote instruction and new technologies that we've learned and ways to leverage this. As we do field trips too, that's a great place to have those grade levels mix. And so we're really hoping that ecology school is a go this spring for everybody. We're planning on it. We are.
No, I have an 8th grader that
I know
is very mad at home.
we're working on both of those. So we have some assurances from the ecology school that Amherst Middle School is a priority, and that they're going to get us 4 weeks, 2 for our 8th grades and 2 for our 6th grade.
Thank you. And I didn't mean to occupy that entire time. Anybody have any questions for Dr. Bernasconi? Yes. Thank you, Dr. Bernasconi, for your time. I appreciate it. All right, let's go up to the booming metropolis of Mount Vernon. Our outstanding principal.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Any questions for our Mount Vernon principal, and specifically the Mount Vernon report? Oh, thank you. I was going to call Beth, but Ms. Beam, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Monty is alive and well, and I've been talking trash for a couple meetings now with Clark Wilkins. It is happening, and there will be a visit from Monty very soon. PTA and I are in talks about when Monty will be making a public appearance very soon. So, more to go. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in all seriousness, it has created a lot of spirit and pride already. Kids are really excited about it. So, thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Ms. Kuzma.
So I swear I saw this, but I can't find it again really quickly. But I saw that you had reports on the health visits. We don't have that on ours, but I was really curious, are you finding that to be typical, or is it really increased, even just the general health visits? Are they significantly higher than in the past, or have you not really, I mean, I know they track them, so.
Sure. Yeah, so I've had conversations with Nurse Deppen, Miss Deppen. Certainly there has been an increase over the last couple of years. I mean, given the situation we're in, we are on the side of caution. You know, we're always looking to make sure that the students and staff are safe. And if that means, you know, double checking on something, or, you know, having students checked out, even if we're not sure that that is happening, you know, it's happening on a regular basis. This was actually a conversation at the Mount Vernon board meeting as well. And we'll be reporting out on that. We have talked, Ms. Deppen and I have talked about, you know, making sure she's supported, feeling like she has that level of support. And those are ongoing conversations. So I think it's absolutely on the radar screen every day. We're having regular discussions about cases and symptoms and quarantines. And I will say, you know, our numbers are actually pretty good right now. But certainly I think everyone is still pretty, you know, they're pretty vigilant and pretty having conversations with her on a regular basis about whatever the case may be, you know, whether it's a student that has symptoms that's not in school, and whether to needs to test, or just those kind of protocols and guidelines that we have to follow. But yeah, I would say definitely those numbers are up over the last couple of years. This fall, I think probably up, but maybe similar to last year, but not every student was in last year. So, you know, this year's created some new challenges, just given the fact that, you know, we're not out of it, but we're trending out of it, you know, so still challenging times. And I want to give Ms. Deppen the utmost credit for her professionalism and hard work with some tough decisions and conversations.
Thank you. Any other questions before I make a comment? I want to officially recognize you at this session. I know I did a probably an overwhelming job, and people are like, why did you talk so much? But how immensely proud I am of you and your team with regards to the efforts that you guys were doing at that school. Our community up on the Hill is really, really proud of the test results that came out of last year, one of the worst years in the state from a testing standpoint. Almost every single district in the state went down, and we knocked it out of the ballpark to the tune of Mount Vernon being in the 1% in the entire state. And that is 100% on the backs of the people inside your building. And so as a board member, as a community member, as a parent, as a taxpayer, I am so proud of you guys. Keep it up. You guys deserve an enormous round of applause, I think, from everyone. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the SAU and the board provided a nice celebration last Friday. We had a professional development day at Mount Vernon Village School, and provided lunch for our staff as a celebration of thank you. So thank you for that. And yeah, I can't say enough about the staff and the work that they did. Can't take credit for that, but I am very proud of the team and their hard work, and it continues right into this year. So thank you.
Knocked it out of the park. Thank you. Do you guys want to make a good? All set. All right, sir. Thank you very much for your time. And let's come over here to Sohegan High School. Mr. Barry. All right. Any questions for Mr. Barry and the Sohegan High School? Ms. Parisi?
Yep. I have a comment. I just wanted to commend the format of your report and the connection to the strategic vision. I really appreciate that. It helps, especially from somebody who's over on the Amherst School District side, who doesn't quite understand all the nuances of Sohegan. It helps me to go through and really understand where the different important parts of Sohegan actually line up with the whole district vision. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the high school? How's the Spotlight program going?
It's for us. It's good. It's a way for us to celebrate success. It's a way for us to keep the message consistent with all 4 grades. Some weeks are a little bit more informative. Like lots at Sohegan. It's a complicated organization. For a school of 700 kids. There's a lot happening. There's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of clubs. There's a lot of courses to celebrate success. There's a lot of teachers doing good work, and students want to promote their work and recognize for kids for doing the stuff inside and outside the walls of the school. And so it's a great opportunity for do that. I'd like it to be a little more engaging with the kids at some weeks. Some weeks are better than others, depending on what's the messaging and what's the theme and what we're doing. But the overall structure allows us to, talk about the opportunities that we have for our kids coming out of like the counseling office or clubs, and but also recognizing academic, athletic, and co-curricular success. And I think as we get used to it, as teachers use it and admin use it and kids get used to it, I think it would be a good thing.
And do you incorporate the advisory program into the Spotlight program, or are they completely two separate?
They're not too. So we look at Spotlight as whole school advisory.
Okay.
So like it's a whole school advisory for us to have a message. So when they do break out, they can run their advisory if they choose off of the messaging that comes out of that. We do a lot of work out of the counseling office and with our social worker and Sheila around like mental health and being part of an organization. And this week we talked a little bit about gratitude and the importance of that. And we hope what happens as advisors and plan their week, they use the information on Monday to kind of guide some of the conversations and activities throughout Tuesday through Friday.
Nice. Thank you. Ms. Schiller?
Yes. Well, people participated in it, and it was just yesterday, and the immediate feedback is, the structures went okay. The kids were able to answer it, and I know that some kids took it very seriously, and some probably didn't take it as seriously as intended. But that's how it is.
So they took it on their computers or on paper?
Computers.
Okay, so if it's an anonymous survey and it's on their computer and you have keystroke software recording their keystrokes, how anonymous, how do you maintain the anonymity of the?
Yeah. Adam, how do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, there's nothing being tracked about kids taking that survey at all.
Right, but if you have a video that's monitoring everything on their screen, the words rape, suicide, all the different parts of that survey, I'm just wondering how that might be recorded in Dalladeo in the student's record.
Yeah, there's no intention or any logs being kept of any kind that would be tracked back to students for those things that I'm aware of.
Any other questions? Yep, Terry. Oh, that's okay. Adam's in the way. Hey, could you just turn your mic? I just got a comment that people can't hear you at home.
That's why I asked him to move one over. Okay.
Thank you.
Spotlight, I'm glad that it was brought up. I really appreciate having that sent home as well. so that I can see what's going on as a parent and talk with my student. And when she gets that message on Monday, we're able to have a conversation about some of those things when she gets home on Monday. I wanted to thank all of the teachers who I know that not as many parents come to parent teacher at the high school level because we know that we're trying to have our kids, have responsibility for themselves. But I really, really appreciated being able to just come, put a face to a name and have a quick conversation. And we made it through all of the teachers in a 2-hour block. And it was a really positive, great thing to be able to still do as a parent. And so I wanted to thank them for still being available and being here. I know that it's contractual, but they were in great spirits even when they didn't have as many takers as the younger grades get. And so I think that is I'm so happy to have that opportunity every year. And I saw the play and it was so much fun. So it's nice to see some of the normalcy coming back and some of those events that really the kids look forward to. And so I just wanted to highlight some of the really positive things that have gone on in the past couple of weeks and in this report. And thank you for all the good work that's been going on.
Awesome. Ms. Precy.
Thank you. I have a question about what Spotlight is. I'm sitting over here and I'm hearing you guys say it, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm new to the board, so maybe there's a reason why I don't know. But maybe you could give even the listeners at home a quick.
So it's so in lieu of small group advisory, where you go with your 10 or 11 students and teachers, we use that time to bring we run two sections of it. We do grades 9 and 12, and we do grades 10 and 11, and it's in the theater. And we have a slide deck that kind of drives it, the template that we share out probably with like 50 or 60 people on a regular basis. And they just collaborate and edit their slides if they need to. And sometimes they present, some like the senior class won't present every week, but community council has a slide and athletics has a slide and the counseling office. And we usually have like motivational videos or pictures or Shilu kind of talks. And kids clubs go and they stand up and they talk about what their clubs are doing. So it's a partnership between students and teachers and admin, but it's two grades coming together at once so we can celebrate success, control some of the messages, make sure students hear about all the opportunities that they might not hear about if they don't open their email, or parents, we do send a lot of communications. And so it's a way for us to emphasize what we want kids to really know. And it brings everyone together, and I like that, and that's the intent of it.
Awesome. Ms. Kuzma.
So you said it breaks up, 9th and 10th grade and 11 and 12. Is there a plan, towards the end of the year to include those 10th graders into an 11th grade, or that?
Yeah, no, it's grades 10, 11.
10, 11, okay.
And then it's 9, 12, and that's just kind of based on the advisory schedule and lunch, and that's like a logistical piece. And then early on with the 12th graders, kind of having the 9th grade, 12th grade day when they came back, and cultivating that relationship.
Thanks. I misconnected those, so thank you.
Mr. Gronstra, and then Ms. Taylor again.
I want to commend you and Kelly Bailey for increasing revising the athletics portion of the website, the links that have been included. I know wasn't that long ago, a month or so ago, when we said it, we'd like to see some more information on the clubs and activities, and now it's got its own separate link in there, and it shows all the clubs and everything. So I think that's great. Great improvement.
Thank you, Pam. Ms. Taylor.
Oh, I was going to say that I have 2 Sahuagin graduates and a current student, and I think communication is as best this year as I've ever had. I like the emails and the links and the spotlight that you send to parents.
I do have one question, and if you want me to take it offline, I absolutely will. Can you just talk real fast about
I like how you frame
that. how we're engaging juniors with the college process, specifically in the fall? I've received as a parent emails, hey, go check out a college, but like what type of communication are we actually conveying to students other than that email? Are we having sit downs? Are they being called in? Like, what does that
Yeah,
look like?
so counselors are currently meeting with kids, and they have a system on how they reach out to juniors. They're going into advisories to have some conversations. And then each week there's, you know, typically 1 or 2 slides devoted to the counselor about certain college visits, who's in the building. They have Naviance accounts where they kind of communicate and select which, you know, colleges that they're interested in. So there's different kind of strategies on how to engage the juniors. But I will say it's probably something that it is something we talk about on a regular on how to improve that and kind of streamline that to make it reach more kids and that's part of it. That's what we're doing right now.
As an ask as a parent, I would recommend that maybe you do that. So just like to really get more proactive in terms of, hey, let's have those conversations early because I just think it's important.
Yeah.
Ms. Lawrence.
Kind of on that transition piece, the sophomores and potential for trade programs. I know there are some trade opportunities that start in junior year that they would need to be knowing about kind of in their sophomore year to be aware. Is that happening?
Yeah, that's, you know, as we get closer to that scheduling time of year in February and March. So right now the program of studies we're in this process where we're developing courses, we're revisiting the program of studies. Students had an opportunity to survey the program of study and then provide some feedback. And then now as we go through it, there's going to be program of studies presented to the student body, you know, through advisory and potentially spotlight and through individual meetings. And then we're coming on January 12th. I think we're presenting it to the Sauhegan School Board. So we want to kind of go ahead and present that in a bit of a different fashion. It's a marketing tool, right? It's a branding tool. It's a way to, you know, get kids excited about the opportunities they have at Sauhegan and in Milford and Nashua, you know, for those other programs. So that usually happens. The backside of it happens right now, the development of it, right? And then the rollout in January, February, and March when we kind of get the course selection, then build the master schedule. And you'll see more communication out there in that time period.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any more questions for Mr. Barry? Seeing none. Thank you very much for attending tonight, guys. I appreciate it. It's always awesome to have you guys spend your personal time to come in and chat with us. Moving on, let's go to the consent agenda. And are there any items in here that we want to have pulled? We'll start off and like we've done customary at our previous meetings, we'll go down one by one. So number 1, number 2, number 3.
Could you pull number 3, please?
Sure. Number 4, number 5.
Hold on,
I'm sure.
number 4, there might be a couple, we made a few changes at Sauhegan on a few of these that we might want to bring up. There's just like 2 of them.
Okay, we'll pull it.
Yep.
Number 5. And I believe the one that's in there is the amended one, correct, Danae?
It is, but I had made an adjustment after.
Okay.
Right before this meeting.
Okay. Number 6. Number 7. Number 8. Number 7. Number 8. Number 8. Perfect. So let's go ahead and entertain a motion to approve number 1, number 2, number 5, and number 6, which is listed as the Treasurer's Report, Enrollment Update, September 20, 2021 draft minutes, and October 13th, 2021 draft minutes. Mr. Gronstra moves the motion. Do I have second? Mr. Coughlin? Any discussion? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Gronster, yes.
Grund, yes.
Peters, yes.
Taylor, yes.
Clark, yes.
Hinckley, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Dean, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes. Glover, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Thank you. That motion passes. So let's go to number 3, Ms. Taylor, with the data privacy update.
Just wanted, if the superintendent could update us on the progress and what he's evaluating and what decisions or factors are being used to look at software?
Sure. So I think the memo has all the information I wanted to include for the board's consideration. Brian Miller, our tech director, has done a great job evaluating other filtering software. So there was a concern from the board about the Deladeo filtering software. And so Brian was asked to look at alternatives. He evaluated 4 alternatives, 3 of which have signed the New Hampshire Data Privacy Agreement, which means those 3 would be ones that we could switch from Deladeo to, either of those 3. He included the information in there under the evaluation piece. I'm not recommending a change at this time because Deladeo has signed the New Hampshire Data Privacy Agreement, and it seems to be working according to our expectations. But because this was a board concern, I thought it was appropriate to give the board the information, and if the board wanted to take action, I'd be happy to make a change.
Mr. Glover.
The evaluation talks about categories managed by the company for filtering, as if that's a negative, and maybe it is. I guess two-part question is, why is that? What is that, and why is that a negative? And is it true that then Deladeo does not do that? It's managed by some other, like by us or by somebody else? And why would that be an advantage?
So I think what Brian is saying is that it's fairly restrictive in how websites are categorized by the filtering software and might lead to false things being categorized incorrectly. So if, as an example, if gaming websites aren't allowed for our elementary kids and there's a math game website that teachers use in class, it could be artificially blocked and then require an affirmative move to whitelist that, which could be onerous sometimes. So I think that's what he's referring to.
Any other questions? Ms. Grant.
Just for a clarification, so one of the concerns that we had is Deladeo software is that there's some depository potentially somewhere that was collecting this data, but no one was looking at it. The question is that data still being collected? Where is it, and who may or may ever have access to it?
Yeah, so I think you're referring to the option in that software to provide alerts based on certain keywords that students might enter into their computer. We're not collecting that information. That is turned off. There is no data that has been stored.
It's not being collected anymore.
It's not being collected. Hasn't been since the beginning of the school year, I don't think.
Okay.
So we have no plans to turn that back on, but that does remain an option in the software that we have no intention of ever using.
Okay, thank you.
Before we get to you, Laura, Chrissy.
Is that an option available to any of these other systems?
I'm not sure. I didn't look at those at that detail, but I know that there are other softwares that do similar things. I would imagine some of these do some similar things. Some people see that as a feature. I don't see it as a feature. I see that as a problem because we would need 24/7 monitoring of those logs and to own that additional responsibility. So we have no intention of doing that.
Before we get to you, back to Laura, Ms. Precy.
Just to follow up to Stephanie's question, with the option to turn on monitoring, before monitoring would be turned on, would the board be notified?
I'm happy to make that commitment. It's not going to be turned on as long as I'm here, but.
Okay.
Yep.
Ms. Taylor.
A lot of the software does the same thing. They all have a lot of the features Deladeo has. The keystroke, the monitoring AI to analyze your video screen. And I'm a minimalist when it comes to protecting student privacy. Has there been any effort to evaluate and find software that does as little as possible and still protects from having what you don't want coming through a firewall? Because I know I have firewalls on my own computer, and yet it's not doing keystroke technology or analyzing my video.
Yeah, I don't know. I trust the work Brian did. I asked him to be exhaustive in his search of alternates, and this is what he provided me. So I'm sure there are others that do even less, but we're also balancing our requirements under FERPA onto SIPA to to be actively monitoring students' internet access. So there's a balance to be sure.
Any other questions? So the official recommendation is to do nothing at this point, not recommend any change based on the requested board action comment, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, let's move on to number 4, the facilities update. Ms. Grant. Oh, I apologize. Okay, facilities is fine. So, no worries. Let's go down. No other comments about facilities then, right, guys? All right, let's go to, as always, Roger's doing a phenomenal job. And Mr. Barry, the high school's looking awesome. You know, coming in the main entrance, lights out. It's just really nice job taking care of that. So please give kudos to those people. It's a huge, huge improvement. Policies for adoption.
Okay, so at our Sohegan School Board, we had one BHC, Board Staff Communications. We made 2 changes to. One, so the last section called, that's social interaction, it's page 114 in your packet. The very last line where it says unethical conduct, we made a motion and we changed to say unethical behavior instead of conduct. So we want to potentially propose that change here for ours. And then the other one was Laura's change to say official communications. Her change, Christy's change. But it was, and Steve, correct me where the official was. It was official staff communications.
Both those places.
To the board and the official board communications to staff.
Yeah, it's the 2 subheads that are underlined on that policy, where it says all communications will be all official communications, and all board communications will be all official board communications.
It was so we could send each other Christmas cards without having to send them through Adam.
So, Mr. Chair, I'd suggest that we hear what Stephanie wants to bring out, and then we dispose of everything else and go back and debate these issues.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's that's just the one that we had the change to. So that was the one. I don't know if we want to make a motion to do that.
So I know Mr. Steele wanted to make a quick comment.
Yeah, I actually support both changes and wanted to say that. I think the word unethical conduct triggers a response towards the code of conduct at the state level. And so the word behavior as a synonym for that seems like an appropriate bifurcation in my opinion. So I don't know what the policy committee folks think, but hearing the Sohegan board member comments on Monday, I was in support of that change.
So Mr. Coughlin, with 2 minor changes, is policy comfortable just modifying and accepting a motion to modify that and then adopt?
Policy committee hasn't discussed it, but I voted in favor of this at the Sohegan board meeting as well.
Okay. Ms. Kuzma?
I was just gonna say, I just did a quick look around the table and everybody could went.
Okay. Stephanie, would you like to make a motion?
make
We'll
my
adopt
part.
this and then we'll move on.
I will make a motion to,
Step 3, 4, and change the policy. How about that?
yes, you go.
Bundle it all together.
Sure.
Go ahead. Make the change.
Actually,
So do you want me the specific changes? So
Hold on for just a moment. I'm sorry, Beth, go ahead.
it's just before we vote on the policy packet as a whole, I just want to make one clear thing. So go ahead and then come back to me.
Okay, so let's make entertain a motion to modify.
modify, policy BHC to say official staff communications to the board as the topic. Also make the change to official board communications to staff.
It actually
And
was
It wasn't-
underneath the heading.
It's
It-
under,
Yeah,
sorry,
yeah.
underneath the headings?
Yeah, so it
That's
would
where
be
was.
all official communications and then all board communication, all official
That
board
makes sense.
communications, yeah.
And
Yeah.
if
You know where
everyone,
it
if
is.
everyone gets it, Danae knows what it is from the last
Yes.
meeting, so.
Yes. And then to modify the last sentence to replace unethical conduct with unethical behavior.
Danae,
I
are,
would second it.
Danae, are you clear with that? Just
From our Sohegan meeting.
good, perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Seconded by Ms. Peters. And before we're only doing a motion to modify and then we'll adopt. So any questions or debate about the motion to modify the policy as stated? Seeing none, let's do a roll call vote. Mr. Gronster.
Gronster, yes.
Run, yes.
Peters, yes.
Taylor, yes.
Clark, yes.
Hinckley, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes. Glover, yes.
John.
Gothier,
somebody
yes.
said that they're not able to hear, so see on there.
Glover, yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Gothier.
Gothier, yes.
Thank you. That passes unanimously. So let's go before we adopt Ms. Kuzma.
So I reached out, I've spoken with Abby about this. The very first policy in the packet at the moment does not have a heading. It's an issue with Adobe. Anytime she goes in and makes a quick change, for some reason, it takes off that heading. There's no change to the, anything below it. It's just that like, you know, Amherst and then that, you know, tells you what the policy is. It's policy BBAB/BDB. Super helpful, I know. But it is the roles and duties of a board chairperson and board officers. When it goes onto the website, the heading will be there. It's anytime she goes in and adjusts the packet, Adobe tends to wipe some of them out, and this one, for some reason, happens a lot. So she had fixed it, and then she made the change earlier today, and it went away again. So I wanted to make sure everybody was aware. There's nothing below that that's changed. So the content, it's just that stupid boxed heading that keeps disappearing.
Thank you.
And we had that same problem at the Zahiga meeting, the same policy.
Yeah, she did. She said it's this policy, it really doesn't like.
And then a point of order, Mr. Coughlin, is this going to interfere with our final read on these policies because we modified, or are we good to go?
I would say that we can go.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead. If there's no further discussion about these particular policies, let's just do one global adopt for Danae's benefit. In a report addendum, somebody's got questions about that? War?
I was going to say, should we be naming the policies? I just thought it might be good form since it's the final read. I know we have over 10 policies, but
okay.
Since the agenda is not part of the permanent record and the minutes are.
Sure. Beth.
Hold on, I gotta find that one again.
Yes. Page 95.
Well, no, it's the one that.
It has no heading.
So it's. Thank you. Thanks, Josh. So it is policies BBAB/BDB, roles and duties of board chairpersons and board officers. And then I have to go find every single one. BDF, do I have to say the entire one or can I just say the number?
Just a number.
The letter's sufficient.
BDF. BDG. EHAC. GBCD. GBEA. GBEB. GBEBE. KICL. BBBA. BCB. BEDH. BHC. BIB. EBB. And that's it.
Thank you. Mr. Coughlin.
I was following along very carefully and your dyslexia kicked in.
Darn it.
The third one was BGD, not BDG.
Thank you.
So BGD.
You guys did legit pick the wrong person to leave these out.
And Danae, are you all set with that? Great. So before we do a motion to adopt, let's go to the annual report addendum. Oh, Ms. Precy, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I've got questions about the annual report. So first up is probably a question for our assistant superintendent. When we talk about the New Hampshire SAS results, there's a note in here that our opt-out rate was rather high this year. And I'm just wondering what the outlook is for our plan for the spring, if we think the opt-out rate will be similar, how we can use the data or not use the data going forward, assuming that we have to take New Hampshire SAS.
Yeah, all really good questions. So what happened last year was that we had a waiver from the federal government waiving the state of New Hampshire from their participation threshold. The state of New Hampshire has to have 95% of their students taking New Hampshire SAS for that data to really be able to be used for accountability purposes, which we're required to do for the federal government in order to get our federal funding. So each individual district doesn't necessarily have to meet that threshold, but if each individual district doesn't, it often would be a phone call from the DOE as to why we didn't meet that 95% participation rate. Now, if other districts are 100 and another district is at 90%, it will all even out. But I am concerned about our participation with New Hampshire SAS, given how many opt-outs we had last year. I think there were two things that may have impacted our opt-outs last year. One was that we did not offer testing to our remote students. So all of our remote students really, by default, were required to opt out of that testing. The other thing was because of our cohort model in our schools, normally if a student is exempt from testing, we find they either, they will often have an alternate activity elsewhere or have an alternate activity that's kind of quiet in the classroom. And those students were in the classroom. We didn't have an alternate place. We weren't going to pull across multiple classrooms and bring all of our opt-out students together in one spot. So those opt-outs were sitting in the classroom and other kids were aware they weren't participating. So we got opt-out letters throughout testing, meaning a student would go home and say, "Mom, here, sign this so I don't have to do testing tomorrow." So we need to be very clear in our parent communication around that opt-out. We can't discourage a parent. Legally, they are allowed to opt their child out, but I think we also have to communicate the importance of the assessment, both to our parents, our families, as well as to students. And then if we do have some students, we certainly need to have leadership discussions around how do we best handle those students who might choose to opt out, where it doesn't become enticing for other students to then choose to opt out. So I'm looking forward to supporting our families in understanding their rights, certainly, but then also the implications for those opt-outs. It's very difficult for us to use the data when we had so many students opting out. It's hard to know, did we have many students who would have been in a level 3 or 4 opting out, or were they students in level 1 or 2? It would significantly change our data. So it's very hard to use system-wide when we don't have full participation or close to that.
Can I follow up?
Sure.
Okay. Just a suggestion as we're thinking about how to share this information out. I think it would be information that's important to maybe include in one of our superintendent's weekly emails or videos or something like that, so that it's maybe something that doesn't get missed by parents.
Yeah.
In a newsletter that maybe not everybody clicks to read, or maybe a few weeks going, before the testing, so that people understand it. I feel like it is very similar to registering when we need to do free and reduced lunches, and how this year we don't have to do that, but we need to do that at the same time. And I think we fall into the same category with this.
Yeah,
Thank you. Ms. Kuzma.
So on here, there's a tiny bit that's difficult to trend year to year because we are missing that 2020 data, but our kids did take it in the fall of 2020 to kind of make up for the spring. Did we ever get the the feedback from that? And is there a way to at least kind of put it in here and asterisk it? Because it is kind of different. It was taken after the summer, but.
Yeah, that's a great point, Beth. Thank you. It was not the summative assessment, it was an interim assessment. So what happened last fall when our students arrived back in school after disrupted learning, the Department of Education required all students to engage in the New Hampshire SAS interim assessment, which is like a mini summative assessment in the fall. And they were taking the grade level before. So it was really making up for the spring assessment that they missed. They did take that in the fall. We did, review that data, but we also had our NWEA data at that time as well. So we were using both data points. If anything, it was kind of getting our students back in the routine of things to take that assessment at that time. And I'm happy to pull that information. I wasn't sure how helpful it would be because it was fall testing we did in early November, because our NWEA was done in September, October. So then we wanted to give students a little bit of a break, get back into typical instruction. And then we actually asked permission for the window to be extended to us so that we could then have our students take that in November. So in November, they're taking the assessment from the previous year. I didn't do a comparison of how they did in November versus how they did in the spring, but I'm happy to pull that together if that would be helpful for the board.
I think it would also be a little enlightening. Yes, it was a disrupted spring right before, but it'd be a little enlightening as to what those results were. I mean, obviously we have to be careful how we treat that data because they did receive instruction in the beginning part of that school year. So it's a little, I wouldn't say completely accurate, but there's some information, and our remote students were able to take that test. So we have more data from that. So,
yeah, I'm happy to share that.
Thanks, Beth. Can you pass the mic down to Mr. Glover?
Thank you. Thanks. Christine, I appreciate you putting in the cohort data. We talked, that was a request that I had made, and it's really fascinating to see that and think about that, notwithstanding the limitations of who, we don't really know who, if it's the same cohort, same individuals, but it's interesting. And to the extent we can do that with other data, that would be very helpful. The exit data, addition of the exit data, I wanted to, whoever put that in, that's very interesting as well. So I appreciate that. And just an edit on the, what's it called? The 5-year plan. If you would, in the next addendum or the next update, just make sure that the heading of the table, that's a 2-page table, comes down to the second page. It may seem like a small thing, but if someone's really studying it, it's like, what was that again? What am I looking at? And it's kind of difficult. And the addition of the clubs. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, Steve did that.
Perfect.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
The budget section of where you have the assessment plan, you just have the budget codes. It would be helpful to know how much we have spent, like last year or the last 3-year average on each of the different tests.
I'm happy to add that
down the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the addendum? Seeing none, let's entertain a motion to adopt number 3, number 4, number 7 as amended, and number 8. First by Ms. Kuzma, second by Mr. Coughlin. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Gronstra.
Grund, yes.
Peters, yes.
Taylor, yes.
Clark, yes.
Hinckley, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Glover, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Great, that motion passes. Now moving on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And with your indulgence, I'm going to combine the next two because they dovetail together quite well. And so I'd like to spend a few minutes and present what is listed as a domain leader conversation, but really has been broadened to be a conversation about our overall budget, the priorities that we have, and our focus as a school system for the next several years. I'll cut to the chase. Our focus in SAU 39 needs to shift squarely on quality instruction and supporting quality instruction in our classrooms and in our schools. We have quality instructors already. We have high quality individuals teaching our students. We have high quality performance assessment and high quality curriculum. And it's our assessment as a leadership team that focus needs to be on improving the high quality instruction that's already taking place in many places in our school system. And so with that, I want to go through this deck that describes our thought process and then the interventions that we think need to be engaged upon by all of us, board, administration, and community, and then the things that have a budgetary impact. For those to my right, I've sent you the Zoom link so you can join the Zoom if you want to watch on your computer. So you don't have to wrench around. I've also sent the presentation along to you as well. So thinking ahead. Everything we do in SAU 39 is about the type of students we want to produce. And so without belaboring the portrait of a graduate, this still remains the characteristics of the people that we hope to graduate from SAU 39. This board adopted an SAU strategic vision a few years ago that still remains and fundamentally has 4 key beliefs: that every kid deserves a unique roadmap to their own success, that every kid deserves a challenge every day, that every student needs an anchoring adult to help guide them through their time in our school system, and that we want to make sure their next step is as affordable and appropriate for them as possible. Those things haven't changed. This board has also adopted a set of things that are key metrics or key measures that we care about, that we want to be measuring, reviewing, and seeing if we're getting the outputs that we want from our school system. The first thing was NWEA growth. This is the measurement of how students grow taking the NWEA test over time. Because if you think about it, students coming into our school system, if they're already high achieving, that's great, but we hope to make them even higher achieving. Students who are lower achieving, we want to improve their performance and make them have more skills the longer they're with us. And so the growth of individual students is what matters the most to us. And you can see our growth data from the last 3 years in NWEA that's declined, as well as the distribution of growth in our various grade levels. And you can see in some places we're above average and others well below. The next thing that we measure is our 6-year degree completion rate. This is the measure of how many students achieve a college degree of some kind within 6 years of graduation from Sauhegan High School. And so this data shows that that number is fairly consistent between 65 and 70% for the last 3 years of data that we have available to us. These are the classes of 2013, 14, and 15. Something else the boards have identified is how do our voters feel about the budgets and warrant articles that we put forward. So this chart shows that for the last 4 years, in large measure, we've been very much supported. There was a blip in fiscal year 20 in Amherst where some things passed and others didn't. But in general, everything else has passed in all of our districts the last 4 years. We also care a lot about how our state test scores, our high stakes tests, compare to our high performing peer districts across the state. And so districts like Hanover, Bedford, Hollis, Brookline, Windham, Oyster River, Portsmouth, Hopkinton, Bow, and Exeter, how do we compare to those in our state test scores? And so in grades 3 through 8 in reading, you can see where Mount Vernon and Amherst compare in the green and red lines respectively compared to our peers. For the SAT scores at Sauhegan High School, how we compare using last year's data, you can see there again where we compare in both reading and math compared to our high performing peers. NWEA achievement describes how highly achieving our students are. Again, not how much they've grown over time, but how they compare to everyone else who takes the NWEA test in the United States. And you can see in reading, we're highly above average, and math, we're inconsistent, but we're above average in most places. There's a breakdown of how highly achieving our students are. Unfortunately, I can't show the very right side of the graph on the screen because some of the Zoom windows are covering up and I can't control that. But it shows that essentially about 6 or 8% of our students are in the lowest quartile of performance overall. And about 40 to 44% of our kids are in that highest quartile. So we have very highly achieving students overall in our school system. Our high school graduation rate compared for the last 8 or 9 years compared to the state. Sauhegan's on top, the state's on the bottom on the left-hand side there. And then how Sauhegan compares to our high-performing peers, which unfortunately you can't see that on the screen, but I can tell you it's very close to our high-performing peers. But eventually our strategic vision says what ultimately matters more than anything else is the number of students who achieve their individual goals. We know that when parents send their kids to our school system, They don't care as much about how the system performs. They want to know how their individual student has fared in our school system. And so the key tenet of our strategic vision is building plans for every kid that have goals assigned to those students so that kids can pick their own pathways with their parents and make sure we're supporting them as a school system. And so the key strategies that we've been over several times have been about those things, about every student having an individualized learning plan, having kids with the ability to get lots of college credits while they're here, 4-year advisory systems over time in each school, and students at both ends of the achievement span having access to special interventions and programming. March of 2021, this board received the list of all of the objectives that we had for the following school, the school year that we're in right now. And there were lots of things listed here. Starting number one with the gaps that were caused by the worldwide pandemic. That was our number one concern coming into the school year, is how we were going to support students in those plans. And all of these things that the board received as objectives were listed for clarity, and we had a discussion about that. What's interesting about this list of objectives is these are the only ones that have budget implications. Many things on that list don't necessarily have a budget impact. For example, our individual plan pilot, which is the second thing on the screen, has no budgetary impact for this coming school year. And so it's interesting that not everything that's strategic in our part of our strategic plan or our strategic vision requires budgetary investment, but it doesn't require a shift in focus or a shift in attention in our school system. And so one problem that we've identified throughout our school system using the data throughout is that there are inconsistent academic outcomes for students in our schools. When we go back to the NWEA achievement data and the NWEA growth data, you can see from the very top level that there's a disparity between different grade levels and the different sets of achievement that our students perform. In addition, when you look just at the difference between Amherst and Mount Vernon at the elementary level, there was a difference. And when you dive deeper into the data, when we look at individual student information, student data, we can see wide inconsistency for our students based on sometimes the teacher they have, the course they take, or even the time of year they take that class. And so what I want to be clear about when saying that we see a problem with inconsistent academic outcomes, that this is not a teaching and learning problem. This is a structural problem for our school system, because all of our teachers come to us with the need to grow and improve each day. We all have to have that growth mindset where we want to improve how we do our jobs. But if Amy comes to us as a new teacher and she struggles, that's okay, because we're going to provide her support, guidance, coaching, and supervision to help her improve her craft. But if she's still struggling 5 years from now, that's not Amy's problem. That's our problem. That's our issue as an administration and as a school system, that we've not supported her growth moving forward. And so the questions to ask when looking at and finding inconsistent academic outcomes, lots of things, some of which we have good answers to and others we don't. Do we have enough instructional time in our schools? In other words, are we spending enough time learning in classrooms, right? Are teachers given appropriate professional development? And I think our answer to that is clearly very much yes. The school district, school system invests in professional development. Are teachers provided with timely and effective feedback that helps them grow? That's a question that we need to talk about. Do we have a culture of improvement every day and a growth mindset? And I think the answer to that is largely yes. In general, our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our administrators are hungry to learn and to improve and to do better for kids because they care about kids so much. Inconsistent academic outcomes, you can ask about class size. Is that a factor? And then even for myself, am I providing as superintendent clear direction and structure to support learning in our classrooms? Doing that analysis as an administrative team, we've really identified 3 areas at the system level that we can investigate to improve those inconsistent academic outcomes and to improve the things people in our community expect of us. One is our instructional time is lower than that of our peers. We found that we have less class time, less instructional time than our peers, and I'll talk more about that. Second, our teacher supervision and evaluation system is unwieldy as it's designed. It does not support all teachers evenly. What that means is we have a heavy system that's excellent when put into practice, but requires an almost impossible amount of time to do well, and doesn't have the support for specialist teachers, special educators, music teachers, et cetera, that are outside the typical classroom teachers. And then finally, our instructional support model doesn't provide enough appropriate content level support for our secondary teachers. And this is akin to if a principal can supervise and evaluate every teacher in their building because they've had that certification. But it doesn't mean that they can appropriately support the growth of a teacher in a various topic. And the parallel that I make with this is a doctor might be in charge of a hospital, but for a radiologist to really improve their practice as a radiologist, a fellow radiologist is the one that can provide them that most specific feedback to grow. Same thing in any professional field. A mechanical engineer is able to improve their work mostly by having a more experienced mechanical engineer supervise and support them. It's the same in schools. Principals that were science teachers are naturally most comfortable providing content level support in that area. And so our current structure doesn't necessarily provide that well. Back to instructional days. So looking just at instructional time, we compared the average of our neighboring school districts. You'll remember that we always look at 3 comparators for our data whenever possible. The overall state of New Hampshire as a whole, all the school districts that neighbor us, and then that list of high-performing peers that we intend to compare ourselves to. So our neighboring school districts have an average of 178.7 school days for kids. High-performing peer school districts have 1 additional day on average, 179.7. But in SAU 39, we have far less than that number of instructional days. And this number, it might be confusing for some, but we start with a 175-day schedule. In some of our school districts, we don't make up 5 snow days, so we're down to 170. And then right now, we also invest in 10 late starts once a month that have the equivalent of 3 days of instruction lost because of those late start days. And so that gets us down to 167 before we've even had conversation about things like the freshman senior start day or the last day of school, the last day before holidays, et cetera. So compared to our peers, this is a concern that I would have as superintendent, because one of our senior administrators put it perfectly. We know we have strong teachers. We know we have strong curriculum. We know we have strong assessment. It's possible we don't have enough time for that instruction to take place. Our next thing is our teacher supervision and evaluation system. Included in your packet under the superintendent's report was Steve Chamberlain's plan to lead that effort for the teacher effectiveness model. So our plan over the next 2 years is to invest in that work to make sure that our teacher evaluation supervision model is supporting the growth for all teachers, giving timely feedback that's supportive, that's helpful, that allows them to grow from a place of care and concern. Because right now our current model isn't as effective in doing that as we'd like it to be. And so Steve's work there really illustrates that by this next March, there will be some likely tweaks to our system that will apply for the next 12 months. But really in March of 2023 will be probably an overhaul of that system that we'll all have input into and the board will adopt. Our teachers will have input into, everyone will have input into that. But we think that's a key thing for us. And so really 4 things in terms of an action plan. So first is, as superintendent, working with you as our board members, is to really say that we need to commit ourselves to a focus on instruction. That instruction needs to be our focus. Performance assessment, our grading system, all of those things have taken a lot of airtime for us over the past several years. That was good work, but now that focus needs to shift to instruction and supporting quality instruction. I think over the next 5 years, we need to make a concerted effort when possible to increase instructional time. It's not something that can be done quickly or easily. It's multifaceted and very complicated. It involves teacher unions. It involves our school calendar. It involves things like Labor Day and all of those things that we take for granted sometimes. But I think as a school system, we need to recognize that's an area of deficiency that we can focus on and incrementally improve over time. The teacher evaluation and support system I just mentioned. And then finally is in those content-specific areas at the secondary level, reallocate existing positions in a better model. So going back to Sauhegan in 2015, there were 7.8, the equivalent of 7.8 full-time positions dedicated to providing support to teachers. So the evaluation support, team leader, department coordinators, all of those things added up to the equivalent of 7.8 full-time positions. And so that's a lot. That's a big investment. What we're proposing for next year is to have at Sauhegan 2.75 full-time positions, the equivalent of that dedicated to these things. One major change that you'll see here from previous budget proposals is we're slowing down the domain leader rollout plan. So after having several meetings with many people, several conversations, we think it's appropriate that the community gets to see some more of the results of that program as it already exists before extending it further. And so the performing arts domain leader and the world language domain leader, we're looking to push out at least a year before investing in that plan. It is possible that if there's change in our personnel that in world language, for example, or some other category where we have budget savings that allows us to move more quickly, well, one of our school boards could make that decision later. But in terms of the budget, we're no longer budgeting for those two positions for next year in our school system. In the long term, over time, we do intend on having domain leaders that some that span the 5 through 12, meaning they only apply to AMS and Sauhegan, and some that are K-12 as well, that will support all of our students. But for now, the key for next year, and this is something from Mike's presentation about the belief behind the distributed leadership, but the plan for next year is that the humanities domain leader would continue at Sauhegan only next year. The current existing science and math domain leader would split. There would be a math domain leader that would begin some of its work at AMS next year, and a science domain leader that would be Sauhegan only for next year. So this, again, is a fairly significant slowdown of that implementation. So back to the domain leaders and their job description, what do they do? So these are highly qualified teachers with administrative degrees. So they're going to teach about half of the time, lead their respective departments, and then be involved in the coaching, supervision, and evaluation of teachers within that department. The desired outcomes, it really is consistency and instructional quality. That's what we want. We want there to be support for teachers so that they know how they can grow, how they can improve, and have someone there that speaks their language that can support them in that growth and ultimately improve the outcomes for students. So when we look at our FY22 objectives as they have changed and as they have developed, some things we've completed already from the earlier list, but there's only a few that really require budgetary impact. The increase in instructional time, over time, will have a budgetary impact. Every day that we run buses costs us money. We know that. The Amherst facilities prep, clearly that is something that's a major thing on the ballot this year. We're going to hear a little bit more about in a few minutes. And then really the last thing is this domain leader plan as it continues to roll out. So with that, I just wanted to stop there and answer any questions from the board. I think this will be a continued conversation amongst all of us because my team, some of whom are here, some of whom are here, have worked really hard at identifying, understanding our community's expectations, which we've all heard and are sometimes even get tired of hearing. We pay a lot for our schools. We invest a lot in our schools. We want outcomes consistent with the outcomes in other school systems. And we believe that too. And in our professional judgment, these are the areas of focus that are needed in order to achieve the outcomes that we all expect and demand. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. So before we turn it over to who wants to volunteer for the committee, as stated in Mr. Chamberlain's memo, let's open it up for questions. So I'm assuming we have tons. So looking for people that normally like me to speak out.
Hearing that.
I think we're digesting it. There's a lot there. So Ms. Kuzma, go ahead.
So, you gave us a little bit of a preview over kind of how these ideas, especially about the domain leaders, right? That's the biggest conceptual change that we're looking at with all of this. At the SAU budget meeting, you made a quick comment about, or maybe not so quick, but you made a comment about where this idea comes from. And you had said that a lot of our higher performing districts around us and within the state actually do this already. You mentioned one in particular, just because you happen to have prior knowledge of it, but I'd like to know more about who some of the other ones are, just so that we can really grasp that concept of you're not making this up.
Fair enough.
you pass the microphone down to him?
It's nice to see progress on our strategic vision. It really is. And I appreciate your ambitious addition of the performing art, excuse me, the performing arts and the world language domain leaders. In this case, it probably makes sense to tap the brakes to demonstrate what the successful metrics are going to be. And I don't know that we can expect student outcomes to magically all rise. So we'll have to develop some metrics that make sense. What are teacher feedback? Are the teachers accepting of this, for example? The number of observations done, the type of work that they're doing, and things like that, so that we have some indication of the success going forward. But I'm in support of it. I like that it incorporates the notion of accountability. It's not necessarily tied to student performance as an accountability measure, but rather teaching effectiveness or teaching practices and growth professionally for the teachers. That's something that can be very personal for them and something that could be measured and something that could really offer teachers the support that they need rather than a hammer over their head, and might solve some of the public's concerns about the turnover and what's going on and how is this processes and procedures. This might help with that. So I'm excited to see how that rollout works. I wonder, I've mentioned this before, but we're in a different group right now, so I'll mention it again. I know that we have a focus in math, and maybe that's why it's driving the breakout of the math domain leader into the middle school. And I like that move. Connectivity between the middle school and the high school is really, really important, and it needs some work. We have that, the humanities teacher, and I'm wondering if it makes sense to break that across the district simultaneously so that the team teaching model at the middle school can enjoy the benefit of the coaching model at the same time, rather than just half the team getting it and half the team not. So if I have a recommendation on a modification, it would be that. I think the teachers could benefit more, and those administrative positions, which are the subject of some criticism, could affect more students more directly, and that could be a nice justification for the positions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And we're going to go to Mr. Gothier. Mr. Gothier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would, it's not really much of a question, but it's a point of thought. And Adam, maybe you're already working on this, but I would like to see us try to find a way to alter our late start program next year. I know we've released the calendar, but I'd like to see us, those are 3 days that we can get back for educational aspects of it. I would like to see us find a way to be able to do that. I know it has an impact on professional development, but I'm not sure that we can have, we can say that is more important than teaching students in educational time. And I think that may be an easy win for us. So I'd like to see the SAU administration try to find a way for us to get back all 3 of those days, or at least a portion of those days for student education, knowing that there are other factors that go into increasing the calendar budgetarily, contractually with teachers and et cetera, et cetera. So I would like to at least put that on the floor tonight and ask the SAU administration to look at that.
Got it.
So I will say I concur with that. I mean, late starts is something that really became popular in the 80s and is still around today. Is it something that can be better served in another format or another way?
I will share that at least one of our collective bargaining agreements does require 10 late starts. So that's, again, it's not all of our collective bargaining agreements, but ironically just one. And so again, the intermingled nature of our SAU that is multifaceted, but indeed.
Okay, we're gonna go over here and then back over to you. I saw a hand over here. Was it Christy? You're all set? Okay.
I was gonna
Stephanie.
say, yeah.
Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment. I've spent a lot of hours talking about domain leaders with Mike and our Sohegan Finance Committee. Just getting them to understand, because it could be a little bit of shift the way we've done things at Sohegan, because the culture of Sohegan is leader-centered, so teacher leaders and teacher education, and as well as student education. So having this as more than a coaching position is something new. But as Mike has shared, is that he's working with the staff steering committee, and they're kind of excited to say, yeah, we could use, some instructional support. So I think there's a good feeling at the high school for this. Part of the slowdown was a lot of discussion with the SAU advisory committee, because they do want to see some sort of outcome, because it is a lot of, it looks like administrative overhead. So they just said, can we just see how it looks? Let's see the effectiveness, and let's make sure that we're not stretching these people too thin if we start sending them down to the other schools, because there's that concern there as well.
It's fair.
Victoria.
From the Amherst School District side, we see that the music domain leader will be removed for this year, but we see that the math will fall in place for that 0.25. So that should be, I'm assuming, the same budget numbers? Yes. Okay. And then follow-up question to that is that I just want to make sure that the focus that we were going to be having on our performing arts and our visual arts isn't going to fall to the wayside just because we're not doing this program this year. Because I know at the middle school and at the elementary school, we've been excited about that idea once we heard about the domain leader.
Indeed.
I echo those comments as well. Mr. Conklin? Yeah, but Josh and then you.
Sure, yeah. So as we talk about the math work being done at the middle school, I believe we're potentially piloting new math curriculum at the middle school next year. So I assume the domain leader will sort of help create a connection between the curriculum that we're using and the practices we're using in the AMS classrooms and the SAU classrooms. Is that the goal?
It's one of the reasons why the timing is so important.
Yep. Okay.
Great. And then we're going to go to Terry, I believe, and then back to John. Terry.
All right. So in my professional life, I do a lot of root cause analysis, and I'm so happy to see RCAs here and saying what's working, what's not, and why. And so I really appreciate the deep dive that's been done and the very honest internal look that we're taking. I appreciate that we're benchmarking against other districts, because we don't have all the answers. They don't have all the answers. And the only way that we all improve is to look and see what's working and what's not. And so I really appreciate the effort that's gone into this. And I just want to make sure that if we take things like late starts away, I'm okay with that, but that we still are very committed to the professional development, because I think it's essential, and to supporting teachers. And I'm very happy to see that we want to be more focused in the type of support, that it's content driven, because I do think that that will be more beneficial. And so I'm excited to see kind of what direction that takes. And that's something that I know that I would like to know more about as it gets further along.
Thank you.
Mr. Glover, and then back to
So you mentioned it, Adam, and we are constituent districts, so there are some inherent challenges. We just can't do this. I wonder if there's some structures we need to do in order to facilitate this. For example, perhaps there should be a memorandum of understanding between the Sauhegan and Amherst districts that this is a vision that is intended to be implemented. We need to talk to our 2 or 3 labor collectives and determine whether or not there will be resistance, and why, if there is, why, and what are the impediments to ensure that we can actually do this. Because if it doesn't work for some reason like that, some inherent structural problem, then the budget distribution doesn't work anymore, then the root cause solutions aren't going to work anymore. So I would like to see us do whatever we can through our own agreements with each other and through our own conversations with our labor to ensure that this can and will work.
I agree. I understand on nuclear missile boats, it takes like multiple keys being turned at the same time. In this SAU, it's about 10 keys in about, several different places. Yeah. So this is an SAU that has to work very extra hard to be collaborative and making these sorts of changes. School start times would be an example of something that required a significant amount of collaboration, work, effort, meetings, and then iteration. So This would be similar in nature, that we'd all have to work together to make change.
Ms. Taylor.
Coming back from COVID, you don't have that anywhere in your root cause. I think a lot of students might feel disconnected to the school. I know you're trying to do the anchoring adult. We have a high turnover rate in our admin, at least in the high school, and staff. And I think we need to slow that down, stabilize a little more so that the students feel more connected to the school to be more effective.
Thank you.
You also mentioned, so I wanted to clarify for the domain leaders, you had 4 listed for FY23 and one said split. I just wanted to verify that really there were only 3.
Correct.
For FY.
Showing the position this year that existed this year doesn't next year, was split into 2 next year.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned about the domain leaders being more disciplinarians rather than rewarding the culture, and I'm a little nervous about that, implementing that kind of structure, especially when that sort of hasn't been, at least at our high school, before. And I'd like to see a kind of gentler approach.
I think what would be helpful is near the end of this school year, after Terry takes that call, yeah, I think it would be very helpful for a couple of groups of people to come specifically to the Sauhegan board. One is the staff, the faculty steering committee, who will have had a lot of input and exposure to this, how it's worked this year, to provide some feedback. The second would be the domain leaders themselves to talk through what their experience has been like being in these positions. And then the third would be some sort of anonymous survey of staff who are being served by those domain leaders to see how it's been beneficial or not. I think that that's a fair way to evaluate any system, is the feedback from the people who are affected by it. Because I would agree with you, Laura, the purpose is not accountability. That's not the primary purpose at all. It is to support the improvement of teachers and to make sure their improvement is supported by highly professional people who speak their language. It is true that part of their job does need to be to evaluate. That is part of the job, but the evaluation should be the result of a long relationship with supportive outcomes. So I agree with you.
Great. Any other questions? Ms. Kuzma.
So back to what Tom said about, looking at the calendar, for some of the instructional days and things like that. He was specifically talking about late starts, but looking at it and thinking about, especially this month, but in general, just taking a deeper look into how our days off that are built into the school year are structured and what's more disruptive, even if we have the same quantity of days, having them peppered throughout, a week, a month, whatever, might be more disruptive rather than trying to organize them all together into one week. So that we still have the same quantity, but it's fewer broken weeks. And it could, be one small step to a more, useful time in the classrooms, however minimal that might be.
Yeah, I would agree. In fact, I think Ms. Parisi brought up when we looked at next year's school calendar, there's a week in November where we have school Monday, no school Tuesday because it's the federal election day, school Wednesday, school Thursday, no school Friday because it's the federal holiday for Veterans Day. That's tough on families, tough on kids, tough on, there's not a lot of consistency that week.
Yeah, and only one of our buildings is used at that time for elections. So maybe in some of our other districts, it might make sense to not have, or move the days around or something like that.
Great. Any other primary questions before we go to seconds? We'll go to Ms. Parisi and then back to Ms. Taylor. Unless Pim, was that a hand raise? All right, good. So Ms. Parisi.
I just want to follow up with what Ms. Taylor said. I think when we talk about the continuity of the school experience for our students, we've heard tonight from the public that there's a concern about continuity at the high school. But I think it's important to note over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of changes at our Amherst elementary and middle schools in regard to administration. And not that those are good moves, bad moves, indifferent, but they do exist. And so I think when we're talking about the continuity of our practices within our building, it is important to make sure that we are on a trend where we are staying straight and making that our new trend.
100% agree.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor.
My last comment is, I'm not a fan of competency-based grading. This was the slide sent to the parents, and your assignment is at the bottom, and then it gets averaged into standards, which it gets averaged into first the standards, and then the competencies, and then the portrait of a graduate, which all three of these are then averaged into your score. And my background is engineering, not education, but this is a crazy feedback loop for students to go from their assignment to their score. And I don't think that should be off the table. I know you're trying to make it work. I think at some point that needs to be a factor as well, and it needs to be reevaluated of, is this really an effective way to communicate to students what we expect of them when we give them an assignment? And I'm all for learning for the sake of learning, but feedback is useful. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Seeing none, let's go and solicit some volunteers to serve on the committee. Mr. Chamberlain, I see immediately a hand raised. So a representative of the Sohegan Cooperative School District, Ms. Peters.
Yes, this is right in my wheelhouse.
Yep. And then Ms. Parisi. Any other volunteers? Mr. Coughlin? Okay. So we can break it down to a vote. So like it's absolutely fine unless we want to collectively say, good. Okay. All right. So only 2 volunteers. Perfect. So let's do a motion to appoint Ms. Peters and Ms. Parisi to the committee. Ms. Kuzma first. Do I hear second, Mr. Conklin? No discussion, I'm assuming. Seeing none, roll call vote.
Grund, yes.
Peters, yes.
Taylor's, yes.
Clark, yes.
Hinckley, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Mr. Lever stepped out, and Mr. Gothier.
Gothier, yes.
Great. So that unanimously passes with 1 non-present. Ms. Gascoigne, are you ready? I know we're early, and I know your appointment was at 8:25, but if you're ready, we're ready.
I'm ready.
All right.
I appreciate finishing early. So thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Shannon Gascoigne. For anyone watching at home, I am a community representative and chair of the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee. So I'm just here tonight for a quick update to this board. We've been providing them regularly along the way, so I appreciate you inviting us tonight. And I'm going to keep it pretty concise. And then if you guys have any questions or want me to dive in deeper to anything, I'm happy to do that with the assistance of anyone here who's also on the committee. So we, as you'll recall, we were appointed several years ago by this board to take a look at all of the facilities needs in the district and to offer recommendations on priorities and sequencing of the work. So in the Sohegan Cooperative School District, we had 4 real areas of focus. That was HVAC, the secure front entrance, the locker rooms, and the science lab. I'm pleased to report that the Sohegan Cooperative School Board is busy working on all of those items. I don't have any huge updates. The most immediate is that the lockers will be installed in the near future. So it's exciting to see progress happening. In the Amherst School District, which was identified as the most pressing and the most pressing need. We are looking at a new school building on the site of the existing Wilkins School and a major renovation to Amherst Middle School. The school building on the existing Wilkins site will bring the 5th grade out of Amherst Middle School, move it to the elementary school where it is most academically and developmentally appropriate. And then, of course, removing a grade level from the Amherst Middle School is going to obviously allow space in that building, which we don't currently have. So right now, the committee is hosting monthly public information sessions to share the information with the community and answer questions and working in collaboration with the Amherst School Board. And our last session was last week, and we have one coming up on December 9th at Wilkins.
Awesome.
So I'm going to leave it at that. That was a very, very high level. I have a whole lot of detailed information that I'm happy to provide if you guys need it, but I know you all follow along closely, and I'm just here for an update.
Yeah, you have clearly dived right into this topic, and the amount of detail that you personally know is phenomenal. So any questions for Ms. Gascoigne to address with regards to the JFAC issue? Oh, Mr. Gothier, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I just want to take a minute as a member of the geez, good start. As the Amherst School Board and as a member of the Joint Facilities Advisory Committee for the last couple of years, I just want to commend and thank Ms. Gascoigne for her efforts. She did not start out as the leader of this group, and she certainly has embraced it and has really taken it by the horns. And if this is something that does pass on the ballot next year, it's going to be in large part due to her efforts. So I just wanted to take a minute to recognize her for that and thank her on behalf of our school board, but also as a member of the committee. She has made made light work for a lot of us, which has been incredibly helpful and incredibly invaluable to this community and to this project.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate it. We have a great committee. It's an engaged group of community volunteers, board members, SAU leadership, building leadership. So it's an exciting process to be a part of. The thing that resonates most with me is the T.H. Chan Harvard School of Public Health estimates that by the time a student graduates high school, they've spent 15,000 hours inside of a school building. So the spaces that our children are coming to every day matter. And that's kind of what keeps me engaged. So thank you for those kind words.
Thank you.
Yes.
Any other questions? Ms. Parisi.
I just have a follow-up to Tom. While Shannon has without a doubt been a driving force in figuring out what our needs are in the district, we're at a pivotal point now where in the last several years, we have put on the ballot the architect and engineering fees that were supported by the community. When this goes on the ballot in March, it really is up to the community at this point, what we want. The JFAC and the Amherst School Board with the administration has vetted the costs, we've vetted the plans, we have professionals on board, we've addressed the need for healthy buildings, and now it's the turn of the community. So when Shannon's talking about these monthly meetings, while we've had low turnout, we do know that people are starting to talk about things. We really encourage people to come and to learn why Shannon has spent this much time, but also, just understand how it would impact our town, and then make your decision based on that.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria. That's a great point. And at our public information sessions, I know right now, not everyone's comfortable coming to things in person, and we are offering a Zoom option. And we have a member of the Amherst School Board who's actually sitting and moderating that to make certain that we are asking answering your questions and seeing those. So please engage with us. Also on our website that was developed by the committee, there is a frequently asked questions feature. So go there to see if your question's already been answered. And if it hasn't, please send us your question. There's a form on the website to do that as well.
Thank you. Ms. Beam.
Is this one on? It's going back and forth. Okay, thanks. So if I missed a past forum and I would like to see it, is there a recording I could watch?
Sure. Yeah, there are recordings. The first recording, the first session was in October, and that was a real learning curve for us. It actually shed a lot of light on some of the challenges that we're trying to help correct at the Wilkins School. So the audio visual there is not great and the sound is not great. So for that, I do apologize. If you try to watch the October meeting, the audio is spotty. Still go back and check it out. The November meeting was at AMS, and our ducks were definitely in a row there. So you can see that and hear that, and that's available on the SAU 39 YouTube channel, I believe. You can link to that off the SAU 39 website or off the JFAC Facebook page. If you're streaming this at home on Facebook, you're probably well versed in how to find us there.
Great. Thank you. Ms. Kuzma.
I also wanted to add that as part of these monthly forums, we're doing building tours, which has been extremely enlightening. Even as somebody that, as a parent that spends a lot of time, they're still extremely enlightening as to why we're doing these projects. So the next one is at Wilkins. You'll be able to tour Wilkins after the meeting and really get a glimpse into what our buildings look like right now. Then we'll be back at AMS and things like that. So we'll be flip-flopping around.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions? Perfect. Seeing none. Awesome job as always. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Before we move on to the next item on the agenda, I'm going to ask that the employees of our district please depart so we can discuss a board issue. Do you guys want this? Thanks. And then we have a power cord here for Adam. All right. We're going to be discussing something rather sensitive. So if anybody is uncomfortable with sensitive matters, probably would be a good opportunity to maybe turn off your Facebook Zoom or maybe just step outside. I'd like to officially inform my fellow board members that I and Ms. Grund, the Vice Chair of the Sohegan Cooperative School Board, are in receipt of several official complaints regarding the conduct of one of our fellow board members. The complaints have reported allegations which may be a violation of both Title VII and Title IX of our sexual harassment policy. On Tuesday, November 9th, during a Lawrence Spalding Trust Committee meeting, it was reported that a board member, Mr. John Glover, played an inappropriate audio message on his personal cell phone that was heard by several of the participants in the room with Mr. Glover and by those also participating on the Zoom. And it could be deemed by a reasonable person as inappropriate and of a sexual nature. This action caused several of the participants to become uncomfortable and immediately impeded their ability to participate in the session in an effective way. This matter was immediately reported to our district's leadership and subsequently conveyed to us, Ms. Grunt and myself, on Wednesday, November 10th. Ms. Grunt and I immediately took steps to offer services and support to our employees in compliance with our Title IX policy and took steps to insulate our employees from further engagement with the responsible party. After a week of consultation with District Council and in compliance with our Title VII and Title IX policy, I believe we have a duty to take steps to investigate this matter further. Unfortunately, due to the fact that one of our fellow board members is an involved party, we are unable to utilize our district's Title IX coordinator due to a conflict of interest. Our district's council has recommended this board authorize the hiring of an outside fact finder to fulfill the role of a Title IX and/or Title VII investigator. This individual will conduct a fact-finding investigation and report back to the full SAU board in a timely manner. Once we are in receipt of this report, this body will review the report in a public session and determine any appropriate next steps. As board members, we must maintain our objectivity in this matter until a fact-finding report is provided. We owe our employees a fair and thorough process that is compliant with our board policy. So at this time, I would like to entertain two motions. The first, authorizing the hiring of an independent fact finder to properly investigate the reported complaints to this board regarding the actions of Mr. John Glover that occurred on November 9th, Lawrence Spalding Trust Committee meeting. The second, to authorize the superintendent to take appropriate actions to provide protective measures to employees during the investigation, including but not limited to restricting communications between Mr. Glover and district employees, and limiting all communication between Mr. Glover and the district and requiring that they go directly through the superintendent. So I'll entertain a motion on the first. Ms. Grant.
I'll make a motion.
Motion's been made to authorize the hiring of an independent fact finder to properly investigate the reported complaints to this board regarding the actions of Mr. John Glover that occurred at the November 9th Lawrence Spalding Trust Committee meeting. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Thank you. Actually, Ms. Kuzma beat you that, Mr. Gauthier. Discussion. Ms. Taylor.
So what are the options here? Like you're presenting a motion, but.
Yeah. So in terms of the protection of our employees, I'm very limited in terms of what we can share in public session. And unfortunately, Mr. Glover isn't entitled to any type of privacy protection, being an elected official. And so we have to have this conversation in public. Our options are exactly as laid out by our district council as an obligation to our employees to create a safe, fair, and equitable work environment. We have to ensure that they feel protected. Does that help?
Are we under an obligation by Title VII and Title IX to do this investigation?
Our policy specifically states that all complaints will be investigated.
Right, but other than policy, is there a RSA or what supports it beyond our policies?
Yes, so Ms. Taylor, our actions are guided by our board policies when it comes to issues like this. There is no policy out there that states the incident that currently is under review. When there's a violation of an incident like that, you need to follow X, Y, and Z. So our district council had indicated that this is the best path to create a remedy for our affected individuals.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Mr. Glover.
I would, if anyone was in this position and if there was justification for an investigation, I would support that 100%. I want to make that very clear. I'm a little concerned about the due process of this at this time. I believe the policy that you haven't cited is ACAC. Is that correct? Is that
correct.
Is that the policy at issue? Is policy ACAC?
That's correct.
Okay. Policy ACAC requires the parties are provided due process. There's a process of filing the complaint, and then there's our initial steps and a notice of a formal complaint. And as the respondent of the complaint, I was entitled to the allegations and the details of the complaint, which you appear to have summarized, but I've been unable to examine them on my own. Of course, with the privacy protections that are afforded to the complainants, absolutely. There has been no statement that the respondent is presumed not responsible for the alleged conduct, which is required by the policy. There has been no notice that each party may have an advisor of their choice. There has been no information that each party is entitled to inspect and review evidence. These are the initial steps. There has been no statement that the Title IX coordinator, who you said was been conflicted out, and is going to be replaced by an independent investigator. The first task is that that person will examine the allegations in the formal complaint to determine whether, even if assumed true, the allegations are sufficient to sustain a finding of sexual harassment under the policy. If the formal complaint fails to satisfy the definition of the harassment in the policy, the complaint shall be dismissed. It seems inappropriate to spend time and district resources on an investigation until those due process steps are completed per the policy. If those processes are completed and determined that if the facts and circumstances alleged in the complaint, the formal complaint, on their face assumed to be true, warrant an investigation, then I will support the investigation. I will cooperate with the investigation fully. So it just seems that this is a bit premature, given the lack of the following of the due process per the policy that's at issue in this case.
Thank you. In response to that, Mr. Glover, as you know, there is no mention of board members in that policy. That policy is crafted for the protection of our employees against supervisors, superintendents, other teachers, protection of students against individuals that may be aggrieved. As a school board member, we actually become the employer in this particular situation. And there's nobody qualified inside the district that would not have a conflict of interest that can actually present those facts and abide by that particular policy. Our district council informed Ms. Grund and myself that the best mechanism and the best remedy that we can afford to our employees is the process that I've stipulated here this evening, is to hire an independent fact finder, report back to this board, and in a public session, discuss the conduct that was determined by the fact finder, and then make a decision that would remedy and involve all parties involved.
I understand that the conflict and an independent person would be necessary. In honor of due process, my request would be that the first action that person take and report back to this board is whether the complaint as filed alleges facts which, if assumed true, rise to the level of a harassment per the definition of harassment. And if that finding fails, then that complaint should be dismissed. That should be the first step. If that finding succeeds, then further investigation, and there are protocols for investigation per the policy, should be unlocked and should go forward based upon that initial finding.
I am confident that our legal counsel has advised Ms. Grund and myself the proper process, and more importantly, that those elements of our policy will be followed, and we will be informed accordingly.
Well, you may be informed, but I haven't been informed of the complaint. I haven't been informed of the specific allegations against me.
Yeah, Mr.
I
Grund,
haven't.
I'm not going to.
I'm not going into the merits. This is just due process. You know, I've attempted to seek out legal counsel who is generally, for example, versant in these matters. But the question is, what's the allegation? What's the scope of the investigation? What is the defense? It's impossible to prepare for that, because the due process is being a little bit circumvented, unless the independent person who's hired, first step to report back to this body and to the public is whether or not the allegations on their face, if assumed to be true, would warrant a finding of harassment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Peters.
I just have to slow down, right? This is a first hearing for some of us. So, could you go back to, so that for Mr. Glover's benefit perhaps, and for the rest of us, to what the allegations are, and just, will you remind us of the motion on the floor?
Sure. The motion on the floor is to authorize the hiring of an independent fact finder to properly investigate the reported complaints to this board regarding the actions of Mr. John Glover that occurred on November 9th, the Lawrence Spalding Trust Committee meeting.
So here's where I'm stuck for a sec. I don't know what the reported allegations are. Did you already read that out?
I did.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Again,
Yep,
it's,
nope,
it's.
that's okay.
it's a new
I
thing.
understand. I'll go ahead and I'll actually read that. On Tuesday, November 9th, during the Lawrence Spalding Trust Committee meeting, it was reported that board member Mr. John Glover played an inappropriate audio message on his personal cell phone that was heard by several of the participants in the room with Mr. Glover and by those participating on the Zoom, and could be deemed as by a reasonable person as an inappropriate and sexual nature.
So is the belief that that was an intentional act, or is the understanding that it doesn't matter if it was intentional or not?
That is not for us to determine this evening, Ms. Peters. That is something
Sure,
for the,
just
yeah, for the fact
wanted to
finder to go
clear.
ahead and provide content and situational awareness for us.
That's all I have.
Nope, good question. Ms. Taylor?
I'll defer.
Okay.
I'll wait.
Ms. Kuzma?
So really, our first steps for tonight is we have to approve the spending of an outside party so that we can really get the ball rolling on this.
That's correct. Mr. Coughlin?
So I've been scrolling through the 28-page policy here as fast as I can, speed reading. And I think I would offer clarification if you think it's appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
That we are hiring this attorney to act and follow the policy in the role of the Title IX coordinator who is currently disqualified.
You're 100%
Which
correct.
means all the process features and protections of the policy would then be implemented by this attorney.
100% correct.
And-
There's
and-
nobody in our district that can serve in that capacity.
Right, but this guarantees that otherwise, all the other due process steps will occur,
That's correct.
and everyone's rights will be, on both sides of the matter, will be preserved.
That's correct. Mr. Gronstra?
A couple of questions. One is, do we have an approximate cost? And probably won't know until the investigation is done on, but you know, what the magnitude might be. And secondly is, do we have the room in the budget to be able to absorb that?
So there is capacity in the budget to go ahead and actually pay for this. And the estimate that was given to Ms. Grund and myself is between $3,000 and $5,000.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
So
Ms. Taylor?
your motion on the floor is to hire an investigator, but as Steve clarified, we're really just hiring a Title IX coordinator.
The fact finder will determine the situation and all the facts regarding it and determine the next course of action through a written report to us. So if the fact finder determines after 2 phone calls that the situation has no merit, they will report such to us. We will then review that report at a public hearing and determine such and take the appropriate action at that time.
Instead of calling it investigator, could you say Title IX coordinator or Title VII or whatever you're actually trying to do, which would support the fact that
Sure.
if the policy doesn't justify the investigation at this point, we're really looking for a coordinator to evaluate the investigation.
I can support that. It's just a splitting of words at that point. But if that's something that would make you feel more comfortable, we can absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, to be, I mean, Steve.
Mr. Coughlin?
Yeah, I think Laura and I are on the same page here, that the first duty of the Title IX coordinator is to determine if something needs to go forward. And then if something does go forward, they can either act as the investigator or appoint a separate one. So I think our expectation would be that they would be the investigator going forward after that.
Yes.
So this person is.
It's going to be a combined role.
Rolled into one.
Yes.
Appropriate to us at appropriate points in the determination and process.
As was articulated to Ms. Grund and myself, this process should take approximately 1 to 1.5 weeks. But we did not feel comfortable constraining it because there could be obstacles with holidays and timeframes. And so that's why it's when available and determined. Okay.
Another question.
Ms. Taylor?
So if this is causing the district to pay $4,000 to $5,000, Mr. Glover will have to be paying that for his own attorney, or
Mr. Glover is entitled to any representation that he seems fit.
As
This is
a-
his action as a public official.
right, but as a board member, do we have any protections that we would pay for and provide an attorney for Mr. Glover?
Not that he's aggrieved, it's in violation of his capacity as an elected official. We would not be responsible for providing Mr. Glover with any legal representation. He can do so on his own.
And I'm assuming before, like, that he would be provided a copy of that report as well?
Everybody will receive a copy of that report. The community, everybody.
So I've been on Zoom meetings that are part of this SAU and seen a lot of things break in through the meetings.
So Laura, we're not going to talk about the details tonight. Tonight is specifically the motion, so.
Right, but this
we
has
have to
never
make sure
happened.
We protect.
I've never seen this reaction before, although I've been in Zoom meetings that have been broken into with lots of inappropriate visuals and audios. So I'm just, what is prompting this response?
It was severe enough to warrant multiple complaints in violation of our Title VII and Title IX policy.
Yeah, and I think it's, if I can chime in to that, Laura, I think it's tough for us as board members. If I will personally say that I wasn't there, it's tough for me to say, well, that's not offensive. I don't know that we have the ability, especially in this day and age, to say, well, that's not offensive. I mean, if somebody didn't complain on something else that you saw, that was those people and their reaction to that, but it doesn't mean that they're right or wrong, just like it doesn't mean that somebody's right or wrong in this instance. I don't think that is up for us to judge. It's unfortunate that that it comes to this, but I think that, this is the proper way to go through with this.
Mr. Coughlin.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that all it takes is one formal complaint. It doesn't require a consensus of those who were there. One formal complaint triggers the process.
That's correct.
That's a protection for everybody.
And there's two versions of a complaint. There's a written complaint per our policy in Title IX, and then there's technically an unwritten complaint that could be allowed under Title VII. And so this process actually began on multiple levels and accelerated over the course of the week to where we are this evening. Okay. Seeing no other questions or comments? George, I'm sorry, Mr. Torres.
I'm sorry, I had no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's call the vote. Roll call vote beginning with Mr. Gronstra.
yes.
Run, yes.
Peters, yes.
Is this for investigator or Title IX
Oh,
coordinator?
yeah, can we rewrite the motion?
So we can adopt and change it to the Title IX coordinator, yes. So
Would that be
Want
an
me to-
we'll
amendment?
rescind the votes. Let's go ahead and make a quick amendment to it.
Is it only a Title IX or because it falls under?
Title IX, Title VII, we're going to change it.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll make that motion unless someone already did.
So
Do I have to make the motion to revise my motion, or?
that's correct.
Yes.
So
I revised the motion
Yep.
to say that. we will-
authorize a hiring of an independent Title IX/Title VII /fact finder to properly investigate the reported complaints to this board regarding actions that occurred on November 9th, the Lawrence Spalding Trust Committee meeting. A second on that?
Second.
Ms. Peters? No additional discussion on the amended motion? Mr. Gronstra, roll call vote?
Still yes.
Run, yes.
Peters, yes.
Taylor, yes.
Clark, yes.
Hinckley, yes. Lawrence, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Glover abstain.
Gothier, yes.
Torres,
Mr.
yes.
Torres.
Yes.
Thank you. The second motion is to authorize the superintendent to take appropriate actions to provide protective measures to employees during the investigation, including, but not limited to, restricting communications between Mr. Glover and district employees and limiting all communications between Mr. Glover and the district to go through the superintendent. Motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Ms. Grund. Seconded? Ms. Parisi.
Point of order, district or SAU?
So council had recommended district in this particular case.
Which district?
District meaning SAU 39. So,
Oh, an SAU
So-
isn't a district.
so
Yeah.
I think it's
My
all,
problem.
yeah. So it's all encompassing, but sure, we can go ahead and we can modify to
SAU 39.
any SAU 39 district employee.
Well, I think technically you have to leave district out. It's SAU 39 employee.
That would be,
Ms. Grund, you willing to make that amendment?
Yes, I make that amendment.
Thank you. Ms. Peters, you still wish to second?
I'll happily second.
Thank you. Any additional discussion? Ms. Taylor?
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Could we put a restriction on this that in the event that there is an investigation, because I know that you're kind of, you spoke to the attorney, and I really appreciate all the background work you did, but this is preparing for an investigation when we don't know if there will be one. Is it possible to put for the Second Amendment, like, in the event that this turns into an investigation, we authorize a superintendent? Because at this point, we don't have an investigation.
So
We just,
council had indicated that protective measures are required anytime there's a complaint, period, whether or not there's an investigation or not. As an employer, you, meaning Laura Taylor, and I, Steve O'Keefe, have an obligation to ensure a safe, equitable, and fair work environment. If we do anything to interfere with that, you and I could potentially lose our indemnity and more importantly, expose this community to some sort of civil liability. And so at this point, until maybe rescinded by this board, this is the policy that was recommended.
okay, thank you for answering that.
Ms. Peters?
Just a clarification, and since I was the seconder, I should know what I seconded. But to clarify, what we said was that this is between this buffer of the superintendent would be between Mr. Glover and SAU 39 employees.
That's correct. We are not going to impede Mr. Glover's ability to operate and function as a board member, but we do need to make sure that there are protective measures in place to protect the employees and the aggrieved parties.
And you answered the question that I had in my mind.
Perfect. Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Lawrence?
I just wonder if it should be worded such that it's, because to Laura's point, an investigation is not happening currently, that from this point until an investigation is completed, that those protections are in place. You see what I mean?
So the protections should be in place until it's deemed no longer appropriate,
Correct.
whether an investigation happens or not. So if an investigation is deemed to be unwarranted, we still have a requirement to provide protections.
I agree with you. I'm just wondering if that's worded properly because it says during the investigation.
Okay. Thank you.
And so I would say from this point, during the investigation and until it is completed. Do you know what I'm saying? Because right now, in this moment, there is no investigation.
Okay.
If that makes sense. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yep. So to authorize the superintendent to take appropriate actions to provide protective measures to employees. And then how did you word that? I'm sorry.
From this point until the investigation.
From
Can you just say until a resolution is determined?
From
Yep.
today's date until a resolution is determined by this board. Great question. So this actually will fall under two jurisdictions. The SAU board has jurisdiction over the complainants, and the Sohegan School Board has jurisdiction over the repercussions. So they're going to be having an emergency board meeting immediately following this to talk about their steps. Yeah, so I'm not comfortable modifying this to say that it's only our board versus Sohegan, because Sohegan has instructions and things that they need to do during their meeting right after us. Okay, so we're going to modify it from today's date until the investigation, or, I'm sorry, how did we word that? My apologies.
Basically, until the matter is resolved, investigation or
So the matter is resolved by this board. From today's date until. So Ms. Grund, if you're comfortable, I'm going to reread what we've got here. It says to authorize the superintendent to take appropriate actions to provide protective measures to employees from today's date until the matter is resolved by this board, including but not limited to restricting communication between Mr. Glover and SAU 39 employees, and limiting all communication between Mr. Glover and the district to go through the superintendent.
I will modify my motion.
Thank you. Ms. Peters?
I'll let someone else second because I have a question about it.
Okay.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a second.
And my question is just including but not limited to, what falls under not limited to?
We have an obligation to protect our employees from any type of retroactive repercussions from them filing a complaint. And so we don't know the scope of that. And so there may be a reason or a justification to respond to an unknown today. And so the language that's in there is purposeful.
Okay.
So. Okay. Mr. Glover.
The motion mostly sounds fine to me. But the last piece of the including but not limited to was, oh, could you just read, there was two parts to that. Could you just read that, please?
Yep. Communications between Mr. Glover and SAU 39 employees, and limiting all communication between Mr. Glover and the district to go through the superintendent.
That's
They're not limited to, including but not limiting to restricting communications between Mr. Glover.
yeah. That
So,
the district there is again an ambiguous term. I don't know exactly. So if I have to have a parent-teacher conference with one of my children, that is a communication with the district. Does that have to go through the superintendent? I don't understand what the limit of this is. If that's pretty broad language, and it would be easy to violate without lesser ambiguity.
So one of the components that were actually given as a part of this request was to require multiple individuals in a room in a meeting with your presence. So someone would not be in a room alone with you. That was a request.
Good.
Okay.
Anything else that I should know about? I mean,
This will be communicated to Mr. Glover by,
you see, I mean, you
by
see
the
how it's
superintendent.
difficult to
I understand this.
comply, which I will. I fully want to comply with this and cooperate with this, but I need to know how to comply. So please make that easy on me, because if there is a due process slip up somewhere, that's another problem that the district and the taxpayers of the town don't need.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's call the vote.
Gronster, yes.
Grund, yes.
Peters, yes.
Clark, yes.
Hinckley, yes.
Lawrence, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Glover, abstain.
Gothier, yes.
It appears Mr. Torres has dropped off.
Calling back in. I think he mentioned he was going to call back in.
Okay. Unfortunately, he can't vote if he didn't hear the entire conversation. So in terms of the issue at hand, this matter is resolved, at least for this evening, and we will report back to the superintendent's office about their required next steps of this board. And again, I really need to stress the objectivity that we are required as board members to look at this with independent lenses and eyes, no preconceived notions, and it is a huge responsibility on our part. But our obligation is to serve the community, serve our employees with respect and dignity, and I think that's a minimum standard from our perspective. So try to refrain from conversation amongst ourselves. I'm sure the community is going to have a lot of questions. At this point in time, we're not willing or able to provide any additional feedback because we're going to leave that up to the fact finder to determine whether or not the process needs to be followed. Okay. So, members of the public, we're going to open up the floor for public comment. If you would like to address the board, please step up to the chair. Any topic? Yep. Just remember to please state your name and town in which you reside.
My name is Martin Goulet, and I am a resident of Amherst. And I had some thoughts as I was hearing the presentation on the effectiveness and domain leader conversation that I thought I would share with the board to make sure that as you evaluate this change in direction, you're able to answer these types of questions, or I would hope that you would be able to answer these types of questions. So I heard that other high-performing schools in New Hampshire have implemented programs like this. I'd love to hear about those. I'd like to see a percentage maybe, or I'd like to see maybe even outside New Hampshire. There are other good schools in the country that aren't, one town over from us. Maybe even broader than that, what sort of research supports this direction? Is this something that's, being adopted at leading schools? And, now we've seen white papers written and analyses of performance where we can have some comfort that, yes, indeed, that this is an approach that might make sense. Is it a recognized best practice? I would want us to look at, what else did we look at? What other mechanisms for this type of improvement and feedback did the district or did the SAU look at as alternatives and maybe evaluated and discarded in favor of this particular idea? I'd love to hear about, or have you evaluate, that level of trade-off that was done. I'd love to know, it was mentioned that this will not be evaluated or teachers will not necessarily be evaluated on the basis of student outcomes. I'd be very curious to know what plans would be in place for other quantitative metrics. Right? Qualitative evaluations are always some component of an evaluation, but quantitative metrics are, equally, if not more important than qualitative. I'd be curious to know whether there'll be unmanageable challenges in individuals, in domain leaders who are both teaching and evaluating across our various school districts. What is the impact of various constraints like our employment contracts and just distance? So is it possible for the logistics? What impact will this have on culture in the schools? I know each of our schools has maintained or attempted to grow and maintain a particular culture. I'd be curious to know, the superintendent talked about soliciting input from many stakeholders. I'm curious to know whether that input has already been solicited in the early stages, which frankly, I'll go on record of saying is something that I've criticized the superintendent on in the past, seeking support, but not having sought wide stakeholder input.
You're at 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you.
We'll
Can I
extend it
make
for
one more question
30
for
seconds,
the
sure.
board? I'd like to have them consider. The last thing I'd like to ask you to consider is this the right mix of financial allocations, or does this lead to the right financial mix of classroom versus SAU administrative dollars? It looks to me sometimes that our administrative costs are higher than benchmark. Although no one's been able to share that benchmark with me except for the ones that I've been able to find myself. I'd like you to look at, does this skew things in a direction that we're not entirely happy with? Thank you for letting me go over again.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to address the board? We'll let Mr. Van Bibber go first so we can get to school tomorrow. Go ahead.
My apologies. I now find it quite topical to make this comment. After discussions with current and former Sauhegan administrators, there has seemed to be a general consensus that Sauhegan students have seen a historical oversight of sexual assault reports by the Sauhegan administration as well as Sauhegan resource officers. I have had multiple students come to me with requests of any sort of help as somebody who is an active member of community council as well as a student who shows up to school board meetings. And I've had to tell them that there's no way I can help because if they have not been granted the due process that they are entitled through policy ACAC, you are correct, then there's nothing I can do there. And if the administration is not stepping up to do something about it, then I have to come to the school board and I have to come to the public about it because something has to be done for these students and these families that have to go home knowing that they are not being dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir? If you could just state your name, town in which you reside, and then you'll have the floor for 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Casey Lewis, Amherst resident, 25 Windsor Drive. Pardon, I don't know the process. Am I just making a statement?
Yes.
Or that's it?
Yeah, it's an opportunity for you to inform the board of your views, your opinions, or anything pertaining for that for 3 minutes.
Understood. Regarding the final matter that was discussed in the motion, I don't understand why and would like to know when the formal complaint, redacted complaint, would be provided to all affected parties. It seems unbalanced, clearly unbalanced. How decisions are made and motions are made and voted on without the actual redacted facts and not someone stating a verbal version. So talk about due process. You know, I understand identities need to be protected, so redact what you need to redact. But the fact that that hasn't been made available to the parties, I think is a huge problem. Second, it seems like a conflict of interest that the party that you may hire to determine whether or not an investigation is warranted would be the same party that would do the investigation if it was determined an investigation was in fact warranted. That doesn't make sense. Finally, who is the current coordinator that has a conflict of interest? Who is that person? I presume that's public knowledge. I just don't know who that person is. And what is the conflict of interest? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that would like to address the board? Yes, ma'am.
I'm Sue Upton, live on Mack Hill Road in Amherst. My son William is a junior in school. I was originally just coming to listen to what everyone had to say with regards to Carl Benavides. But after seeing the presentation about every child deserves an anchoring adult, I felt compelled that I need to speak on behalf of Carl because for my son, without getting emotional, he is his anchoring adult. And for all those other students in his band, in the jazz band, he is their anchoring adult. They come to class, they're inspired, they are allowed to be creative, they are allowed to be free to express themselves in a musical way where they feel they are valued. Last spring, Carl offered to all of the students in the band to be a member of the pit crew in the musical. That is usually a position where outside professionals, adults in the community come in and play. He allowed these students to rise up and make music at the level of adult professionals. My son spent, I would say, at least 2 hours every day after school for 3 weeks, learning over 100 pages of piano music because his band leader believed in him. Carl met with those kids for 3 or 4 weeks, practicing for 3 hours so that they could play for the community, for their classmates that were in theater, so that they could play at this very high level so that they could put together this thing that was just, I would say to them, a very high bar, but yet they achieved it. And I think Carl inspires and creates these kids. And if you want an anchoring adult for your child, you should look no other place. And the fact that my son is now demoralized and feels lost without his teacher. I told him I was coming here tonight to speak and to listen. And I have to applaud Mike Berry for bringing in a substitute during this time so that they could at least have someone where they were without a band teacher for over 3 weeks. They had, so what he said is, yeah, it's good to have someone that's there for us, but he's not Carl, and he doesn't, it's not the same. And yes, he's just new to it, but they want their teacher back and they don't understand why he's not there. So I guess I just ask all of you to take time and think about the fact that this could be your child who has lost his anchor and is feeling lost. And without giving a heavy-handed metaphor, he's on a lifeboat drifting off to sea, and he wants to be a music major. And this is his life, and it's really important to him. He had a chance to go to some, he went and spent some time exploring private high schools, sat in on their jazz program, sat on their music program, came back and said, Mom, yep, those students are good. They're not as good as ours. And you know what? Carl has a much better community. We're all happy to be there. We're excited to be there. Those other kids were just good musicians. This is a community of band members. Carl stays after school with those students. I know William was a freshman, a sophomore. I would sit out in the parking lot for a half hour to an hour someday waiting for him to come out from band practice, because he would stay for over an hour with Carl and with those other students practicing. So I just don't understand why we are, at least don't have an answer as to why our child's teachers are no longer there. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I could tell your son's very lucky to have you as a mom. Thank you. Any other comments?
Klopka, Amherst. All my life, I've laughed at people who believe and expound conspiracy theories. So this is kind of hard to say. But we've got Carl, who has been put into this unmitigatable state of limbo by Adam Steele because of an accusation of 2 air purifiers. I hope all of you have read the petition. We detailed it all in there, what we know, what we presume to know. So we weren't happy with that. We don't want that. The parents don't want that. 1,250 people plus don't want that. Adam walks around and smiles, and he tells us about how he is working very hard to resolve this situation. This situation he created. So we reach out to the school board, because I don't know what the heck I'm doing here. Most of these people are not lawyers. Some of you are. Congratulations on that. But most of us don't know what we're doing. We just want to challenge something. We want to challenge a man who did something that is fundamentally against our wishes, against the well-being of our children. So we turn to the school board and we get a little bit of advice. Come here, present yourself thusly, don't expect a debate. You'll be able to make statements. All right, so we do that. And days later, just mere days later, after that advice is given, one of the school board is put into this situation because somebody heard his phone play a dirty thing. What the hell is going on here? What are you getting at? What is this? This is like the Twilight Zone or something. Who is Adam Steele? Like, my God. I don't know what to say. So 1,250 people don't want this situation. You have the means to do something about it. Please do it.
Thank you.
Tiani Coleman again, Amherst. Yeah, it has been extremely, extremely discouraging for all of us over the last month plus. It's been discouraging at first because we thought Carl had COVID and was about ready to die because he had to cancel the all-state jazz auditions at the very last minute because he wasn't allowed to do it, even though he's done it for 16 years and done it very well and very professionally. That is a real tinge on our school and on our community that we weren't able to host that because of this issue. These kinds of things have been happening constantly. Our children haven't been able to practice. My son has all-state auditions for the concert band in 2 days. You know, we've talked about it all. The college students that are trying to apply for college don't have their anchoring adult to give their teacher recommendation for their music. I mean, there are so many things that are happening. But the discouragement is that no matter what we do, nobody seems to be doing anything about it. You know, we talk to them and they assure us that they care about the music program, but they've done the very worst thing they could possibly do to our music program. So how can we feel like they care about it at all? We go to them and they can't answer any questions. They can't do anything. We've sent things to you. We've heard nothing back from any of you. You know, perhaps you feel like you can't talk about it, but we would like at least some assurance that says, this is the procedure, this is what we're doing, this is how long it takes. From what we can understand from the procedure, I can't believe that it's been over 6 weeks and he's not able to teach and there's been no real feedback. The procedure should be much quicker than that. So this is important. It needs to be dealt with immediately. We need to get this resolved. What has happened is unconscionable. Actually, it's unconscionable that this has happened. And it needs to be fixed. And we need to feel like we're being listened to. And this comes actually after we've felt this way with a lot of things, actually. There have been a lot of things that have been happening in this school district that we don't feel like our voices are being heard. But we're all busy and we just kind of go, oh, I'm not happy with that, but we just move on. But this one strikes so close to home, so personally. It affects our kids in big ways. It affects the future of our other kids. It affects our kids who are music majors now in college. It affects us. I had a funeral. I had a death in my family a couple of weeks ago, and it's been a big deal. And yet this has been almost a priority because it's so important, even though I've had to be dealing with that as well. So this is very important to us. It's impacting our homes. It's impacting our children. It's impacting our community. It's impacting the other teachers. It's impacting other students. It's impacting the entire atmosphere. It's impacting me as I sit and listen. I go, do I trust that? Do I trust what they're saying? Or is this really an underhanded way to do something else? That's how I'm feeling. I don't want to feel that way. But I'm just letting you know that this isn't just something like you just listen to us and it's nice and then we all move on. We need to do something about it. And I hope we will do something really soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anna Goulet Zimmerman, Amherst. You're also going to get sick of hearing from me probably, but really, really quickly, the one thing I'm struck by here is that this allegation we just heard about happened 10 days ago. There's already been apparently meetings with council, discussion on what to do. It got on the agenda. You're here, you're having a vote, and you're saying there's going to be someone assigned to investigate in the whole matter. There may be a final report in, I believe you said, a week. And I understand that's from a week from when you get the investigator, but I know how quickly those things can happen. And that's a really, really sharp contrast to the response we've gotten from any of the boards to a teacher who's been out since the beginning of October. And I have one of those seniors. I have a senior who is devastated, who is applying to schools without a music teacher to help her get it together, going to jazz all states with the music instructor who doesn't play band, and she's a lovely woman. I appreciate that she's taking them, but she is not the mentor they need when they're at all state competitions. And we're looking at almost 2 months, and you've done a whole lot in a really, really short time period, which shows you can do that when there's something you think is important.
Thank you. Sorry, I know you kept getting up and then sitting down, getting up, sitting down. It's finally your turn. If you just state your name, town in which you reside, and you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you, sir. My name is Al Saloki. I'm a longtime Mont Vernon resident, and I generally only pay attention to school goings on when I get my tax bill and complain to someone about it because I was never blessed with children, but my tax dollars built this place. And other than that, I stay away from the school board and politics. I'm curious when I read things on the internet about where they collide, but we all know the internet's a great place to learn about things. And so I learned about Carl Benavides' departure from this institution. And I'm going to tell you, maybe relate to a different perspective about Carl Benavides. I've known him since he took the band director job here. I've admired what he's done. I run a 19-piece big band of adults. I get adults into that band occasionally by having them be jazz students from maybe not too good high school programs or college programs. I've occasionally had them come through and be with us for some period of time, or substitutes from this institution. And I can tell you something. I also, in Truth in Advertising, my band, the Compact Big Band, has played here several times. Maybe some of you have seen them. And to a person, everybody in that 20-person organization, generations of them actually, that have played here, been exposed to this music program that Carl Benavides built, and that I was a personal witness to, not as the parent of a student, but as a professional, semi-professional big band person. I'm a high-tech refugee by day. I have been in the adult big band business since 1975 when our band was formed. So I have seen many music educators come and go as players. I've seen them come and go from educational institutions as music teachers. All of the better ones I've ever known. They don't just teach music. They teach young people life. And whether they go on to excel and be a star at an instrument, or just play third clarinet for a while. There's a lot of other things they learn from band participation, including that if you want to work hard, want to put the time in, you want to take private lessons, you want to volunteer, sometimes you just play third clarinet and show up and just do stage prep and tear down, and you're never heard from. Sometimes you play lead trumpet, and you get to play with Wayne Bergeron from the Big Fat Band in Los Angeles. Who knows how they're going to turn out? But I can tell you that knowing Carl the entire time I have, and he also, again, Truth in Advertising, I pay him to sub in with my band because he happens to be a great professional jazz saxophonist, which is interesting because not a lot of high school band directors are also pro musicians, and they may talk a good line of stuff. Carl walks it, talks it, eats it, sleeps it, drinks it. He has done so many things, like many band directors, countless hours that you guys didn't pay for. He's given his band program countless little things, maybe some large things that you don't know about. And every band director I know that's worth a crap takes things home all the time. I cannot believe, folks, that this is about 2 goddamn air purifiers when I read this, if it's true.
Sir, the 3 minutes.
Because they take home instruments. It's
Sir,
a
your
broken
3 minutes
snare
are up. I'll give you 30 seconds to wrap up.
Anyway, I really wish, I hope you examine the facts in this case, because great educators of any variety are tough to come by. Great music educators are almost impossible in today's world to come by. And you're doing the wrong thing to this one if you let this stand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Dwayne, welcome back.
Good evening, everyone.
For the record, you got to state your name, town in which you reside, and you get the floor for 3 minutes.
Dwayne Purvis, Amherst, New Hampshire. I appreciate that you guys have enabled the public to come and express themselves, and particularly to both matters that are very serious, one with Carl and also with John. But I think there needs to be a point of clarification here. In both cases, in the first case with John, you guys are the de facto governing body for the SAU. You are not a school district. Second thing is, and whatever happens with John will be determined by the Souhegan Cooperative School District. Also, what happens with Carl will be determined by the Souhegan Cooperative School District. And I appreciate the passion, and I'm moved as well by what is said. And oh, by the way, Carl is a great guy. I have my wonderful Carl stories from 20 years ago. He is the real deal. And I think that there's been a mistake made that needs to be fixed. But I get it. You guys are kind to listen, but this is a decision that the Souhegan Cooperative School District, the board, the elected people, are going to have to deal with. And although you're not seated as the Souhegan Cooperative School District, I hope that you will listen unofficially, that you hear this, and whatever it is you need to do, you need to govern and do what you need to do now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public?
I wasn't going to speak. I'm Amy Harrison from Amherst, New Hampshire.
Thank you. You have the floor for 3 minutes.
We almost passed his bedtime. We were at a scout meeting, but he wanted to come in support of Carl. He's in jazz band. He's had private lessons from Carl since 6th grade. Talk about anchoring adults. He had jazz all states. He was supposed to be in all states this weekend. He's not going. I said, how's jazz band going? It's not fun anymore. This is a kid who has passion for music. And I see him almost losing it because of this loss. I know Carl on a personal basis because of what he's done for my son. And it's been a big mistake. And I just wanted to be here to show my support for Carl and the person that he is and the passion that he has for music. My son's a scout. You learn a lot of leadership skills, and that's the one thing that he always comes home saying, I love Carl's leadership skills. He's hard on you when he needs to be, but in a way that's compassionate, and he teaches you and you learn from it, not just music. You learn how to be a good human being. You know how to treat other people. So his students, when they were told, well, first of all, they weren't told anything for weeks, and they had the worst case scenario in their minds. They thought he was sick. They thought he had COVID. They're like, well, I don't think he has COVID. Maybe it's something worse, because they weren't hearing anything. And that's not like Carl, to not communicate with his kids. And then when they were told, oh, he resigned for personal reasons, I heard the recording of when Mike Berry came and had that meeting with those children. And the kids were saying, he resigned for personal reasons. They felt abandoned. Like this guy left them. Carl would never do that. And to come to find out that is not what happened. They were lied to, which is even worse. So this man would never leave these kids the way that it has been perceived that he did. And they miss him. And they're struggling and they're suffering. So when we're here, you're here for our kids. You're a school board. You're supposed to be supporting our children. We have a large group of children that are hurting right now, and they are suffering. And I really hope that this decision gets reversed and we can get Carl back, because he is a great, great asset to this school. You're not going to find anyone better. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And thank you to your son for staying late tonight. Okay. Any other comments or issues they'd like to address the board on? Okay. Thank you very much for attending, everyone. I really appreciate it. Although our policy prohibits us from responding back, your views clearly have an impact and really allow us to see the full picture of a lot of these scenarios. So although you may not hear dialogue back, it does allow us to take that into consideration when we consider issues. So thank you. With no further business, I'm going to call this meeting to close. We'll just do a quick roll call vote. There is no non-public session tonight, but the Sohegan Cooperative School Board has an emergency meeting. Roll call to close.
Run, yes.
Peters, yes.
Taylor, yes.
Clark, yes.
Hinckley, yes. Lawrence, yes.
O'Keefe, yes.
Beam, yes.
Coughlin, yes.
Parisi, yes.
Kuzma, yes.
Conklin, yes.
Glover, yes.
Gothier, yes.
Torres, yes.
Thank you, George. Stay on the line here.